Okay, so, wait a minute. Okay, microphone is on. Oh my god, I'm over on, oh I can't, it's so awkward. Hold on, let me just start again. How do I? Hello! Oh, dark, as in you can't see me? What do you mean? Like, as in no camera? I can see me. I wonder what's going on. Like, this is what I can see. I can see me. Is it still not working? Like, I can see. Hey, Helen. Hold on, guys. Let me just try and figure out what's going on. Where's Penelope on here? That's so weird. Like, this is what I see. I see me. Helen, can you see me over on D Live? Or am I just talking to myself as well? I mean, I am wearing like a hoodie and a t-shirt, so I mean, I'm not looking this is super fly, as they say. I'm just kind of looking normal. I don't understand. Like, I can see me. Maybe if I go to Twitter. Yeah, maybe if I go to Twitter and see what's going on over on Twitter. My hair's in my way. Oh, I've just put a hair in my eyeball. Twitter. Where am I? Man, I've just spent... Oh no, it's working. I think it's just Telegram. Yeah, it's Telegram. Not Telegram, it's Twitch even. Yeah, I think Twitch is messing with me. Okay, so that's okay. So I can see me on... Where have I just been? Twitter. Okay, so you can see me on Twitter. I'm guessing you can see me over on D Live, because otherwise lovely Helen would have said that it's not working. So I think it's just Twitch. Maybe you haven't updated your Twitch, or Twitch has just been a dick. Who knows? Okay, so my sincere apologies for last week. I had like zero voice. I couldn't speak at all. And then today I'm very late because I was we're going to be going through the Human Rights Bill of Rights consultation. Final day to submit is on the 26th. So for those of you who kind of knew and you're thinking, well, why is she only talking about it now? I'm not only talking about it now. This is something that we kind of discussed when it landed in November last year. The first they were talking about the public consultation in November last year. And then we did a huge thing like January, February, and then we did it again and submitted, and this is like the second submission, and one of the reasons, like one of the things I've said before, is I will always actually submit mine really late because they keep changing the goalposts, and I got caught out by them changing the goalposts the beginning of 2021, back end of 2020, beginning of 2021, when I submitted something into a consultation and they accepted like 65,000 consultations with regards to human rights and the Coronavirus Act, and then they reopened the consultation and gave everybody 2 weeks and didn't tell people they had to do it again, and so then they only had like 30,000 people who like realised and resubmitted, and they just kind of said, oh well, only 30,000 people care. So I will always submit mine right at the end. And what they did with the previous human rights consultation is loads of people submitted saying it wasn't, it didn't meet the needs of the consultation because it was too complicated, and like 24 hours before the closing date they released they released a version, like a skim ready, easy to read version for people who need help, but it was shut for everybody else that 24 hours later. And so by doing that is they completely eradicated a lot of people's issues by just saying, oh well, we fixed that problem, so oh well. So normally I kind of don't like this is I would prefer not to do this until to submit until 2 hours before the deadline. So you are getting it early, you're getting it like a day and a half early. So we're going to go through my answers, my responses, and it's taken me like 4 hours to do. I don't know why, I always think it's quicker. But also I did get distracted with the whole 6 million Jews thing, which we're going to talk about because I thought it was really interesting. We're also going to talk about 5G, and we're going to plan for how we can kind of push back against 5G. And we're going to talk about blood. And if you've been here with me for the last 2 years, I can't believe it's like, it is 2 years. Wow. You'll know that the whole blood thing has cropped up and cropped up and cropped up. And on Monday, while I was doing some other work, there was this whole crazy idea about blood and blood types and the Rona and the Vax and all of those things, coming at it from a slightly different angle that I personally haven't seen anybody else talking about. Bearing in mind I'm a psychologist, not a medical professional, I'm not a virologist or a biologist or any of those things where it should be more at their forefront of their minds, right? Because this is something that they do. Hello, my pal. I am. I'm lovely. I keep getting kicked off. So if you can't, I mean, YouTube boot me faster than everybody, right? So I am over on Telegram. But it seems to be the only place that allows me to stay. And I know people don't want to join new things. I don't. I've not joined Truth Social because I just can't be arsed. I did join Gab and I didn't not know. Was it Gab? Yeah, I don't know. The green one. I just but I will always be up until they boot me off, right? But so far I've been able to say whatever I want to say, and Telegram seemed to be holding the line the best at the moment. And even if I do get booted, hey Angie, I do get booted and you miss the videos, they get uploaded to my Muse channel, which is just Muse AI. I think it's just museai.katewoodland. Let me get it now. I need to update these things properly. I just yeah, it is /Katie Woodland. So it goes up there, and they're really cool actually, because they're just a hosting platform. They don't seem to be that bothered about what's being uploaded. Like, I've never had any kind of copyright claims or any issue. Like, and I've uploaded a documentary. I mean, I'm probably going to get booted now, aren't I? Relentless Katie. Yeah. I mean, yeah, so at one point there was thousands of people who I was talking to, thousands upon thousands, and then overnight there was like 5. But you know, it doesn't matter, I'm going to still keep talking. It's tough because eventually people will, you know, find me again, and If not, I will just keep talking to myself. So, without further ado, because it is quite late. Right, let me see if I can... Oh, I haven't used OBS for a while. Right, how do I... Where are we? Right. Oh, there we go. Okay. Word I want open. Okay. Oh my gosh, look at this. I think I've cracked this. Okay. Oh, it's getting really hot in here. Sorry guys. Got my arm stuck. Okay. This is why I probably shouldn't be on camera, because I never sit still. You know, like sometimes they just look pretty pretty all the time, and you've got me like moving around, jumping around, getting undressed, not like OnlyFans undressed, just oh my god, oh my god. Anyway, right, Bill of Rights. So 26th is when this it is like the end of the line, right? So I'm going to go through. I have answered every question, okay? So reaffirming, not a lawyer. I'm a psychologist, which has got nothing to do with laws and legislations, right? So I do believe having a master's in psychology gives me an advantage over somebody who's just got GCSEs, or somebody who's not got GCSEs. You know, we've got to remember that there's lots of people in this country that don't even have GCSEs. Lots of people can't even read or write, right? And so therefore I do acknowledge that I do have an advantage, an intellectual advantage over other people who have not had that higher level of schooling. Not necessarily with regards to intelligence, but I mean with regards to attempting to interpret and move past the bullshit in the language that they're using when they're trying to say what they're trying to say, right? So I have an advantage, and I found it incredibly difficult to figure out exactly what they were trying to say, right? They have used super confusing, contradictory, it is not in plain English, right? One of the it's just not in plain English. And you have to remember that this Bill of Rights is supposed to be strengthening our human rights so that we the people can go and protect our rights in court. That's what it's supposed to be for. It's supposed to be strengthening it, and it is more complicated than the one that we have, which I mean was all right. I mean, I thought that was kind of relatively easy to interpret. Like, this is really fucking complicated, and I have had a good 10-15 years. Oh, I'm maybe long. I'm older than that. When did I first go? Like 2007, I first went to uni. So quite a while attempting to figure out what people are saying. So they do it in scientific research all the time. They just use random words that are unnecessary. They use fillers, they use Latin names for things that are just real world. Like, it's just, they make it complicated so people give up. So there is no way the vast majority of people are going to be able to go through every single one of these questions and answer it. And you don't have to, okay? You can go through and maybe answer one of these questions and submit that. I mean, I would encourage everybody to pick at least one of these questions, right? And if it's something that you feel strongly about, then give kind of your all to this, to a single question, right? Doesn't matter whether you feel strongly, and it's completely different to what I'm saying, right? Some of these things you're probably not going to agree with my point of view. That's the point of a democracy. But hopefully my answers will enable you to kind of interpret the question a little bit better, and therefore potentially understand what they're proposing in the Bill of Rights. Actually, I know for a fact there's going to be a couple of these that many of you are going to disagree with me on, and it's okay. Hey, Ellen! Have you just gone somewhere else? Wait a minute. Yeah, you've moved from... Where were you? Yeah, moved from D-Live. Well, I'm X-rated over on D-Live, which is, I think, is hilarious. But it's because you talk politics, right? No nudity, just politics. So hopefully it's going to enable you to kind of grasp, oh, this is what they're asking. Now, I want to say a huge thank you to the the Joint Committee on Human Rights, because the way that they've worded the questions is they have helped bridge some of the gaps between the government bullshit and you attempting to interpret it. So without their rewording and their wordings of the questions, I would be lost to have even figured out that this is some of the things that the government's saying, right? But even if you don't want to answer any of these questions, please do make sure you go and you do the survey. But it's literally like yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then the last question is, do you think, I'm just sorry, I'm trying to look at it while I'm talking to you. Do you think they should change it? I mean, just like, that's just a no, right? Just no. But should you want to and feel inspired after this to go all in on one question, maybe answer a couple of them, then please give yourself a good couple of hours. Yeah. Give yourself the time to do it justice. This, I cannot stress enough, our Human Rights Act is the thing that has saved us as a nation in these last 2 years. The only reason Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have been so brutalised by the cabal is because the Human Rights Act is there, but it doesn't hold the same weight. Like, Scotland's devolved, Wales is devolved, and Northern Ireland are devolved, and they have an option to interpret legislation. Now, it's supposed to be England and Wales, so I'm not quite sure how Wales have been getting away with it, but there we are. It is the thing that saved us, and this is why they are so adamant on trying to remove it. Like, if we lose our Human Rights Act, we are fucked, right? There is no sugarcoating it at all whatsoever. Not at all. It is, we are up shit creek, no paddles, and all drowning before we've even realised we're there. It is so detrimental that you've got to at least take the opportunity to fill in the survey. Like, okay, so survey here. Okay. Okay. So, first thing first, I think there's 7 main questions, and each has got a question in between. So I can't see the comments while I'm reading this. So I will kind of whiz forwards and backwards as much as possible. Okay, so call for evidence. Number 1, relationship between the UK courts and the European Court of Human Rights. So the question 1.1 is, clause 3 of the bill states how courts must interpret convention rights, including by requiring them to have particular regard to the text of the convention right. What would be the implications of clause 3? So this is talking about with regards to the European Convention rather than our convention, and this is something that they do throughout, is the European Court of Human Rights and it's not always that easy, but this is specifically talking about interpretations of the European Convention, not ours, our old one. So this reduces rather than strengthens the powers of the UK courts. UK laws are created by UK case law, as has been the case for over 1,000 years. An overwhelming majority, this is my response, an overwhelming majority of people voted for Brexit so that the UK could once again be responsible for setting laws based on UK culture. This decision is in direct conflict with the Brexit decision and the will of the UK as was decided at the ballot box less than 8 years ago. The UK is a sovereign nation under international law and therefore has the right to govern as such without the oversight of any other body. This right should be upheld above all others. So the second question, Clause 3 also provides that the courts may diverge from Strasbourg jurisprudence but may not expand protection conferred by right unless there is no reasonable doubt that the European Courts of Human Rights would adopt that interpretation. What are the implications of this approach, the interpretation of the Convention of Rights? So this is basically saying that courts... that if a court makes a decision, in order for the court to make a decision based on somebody's claim against a human rights claim, is in principle the court is allowed to say, well, they've decided that in the European courts, we don't agree with that, and we're going to go like completely the other way. Like what they're saying is like batshit crazy, we ain't doing that in the UK, which is what everybody believed was going to happen with Brexit, right? English laws, well, British laws, British people. But what it actually means, and when you look into the finer details, is they're saying, oh yeah, of course you can divert, except if you think that if this was in the European courts would argue a different way. So they have to then guesstimate, right? They have to go, oh, well, actually, this is like completely counter to kind of like UK custom, but it fits in with French custom. So if it was tried in a European court and it was a French thing, then it would go that way. So actually we now have to be we have to do exactly what the French would do because the European Courts of Human Rights would say it's okay. It's just like this entire roundabout clause saying, it looks like we're giving you power back to you, but actually we're taking it all away. And this was one of the huge things that was picked up by all of the human rights lawyers during the initial consultation. That clause 3, it just stops the British courts and the UK courts being able to make any decisions, and in reality actually diverging from what the European Court of Human Rights is saying. Really, it's all just sneaky. So I just put, similarly to the previous answer, no court except the courts of the United Kingdom has the powers to determine what happens to Her Majesty's subjects. So question number 2, interim measures and the UK's international obligations. So clause 24 would affect how UK courts and public authorities take account of interim measures of the European Court of Human Rights, prohibiting them from doing so in many circumstances. Is this compatible with the UK's obligation under the European Court of Human Rights and international law? Right, so this clause is saying, right, so bearing in mind, this is why it's bonkers, right? So bearing in mind, clause 3 says, UK courts can make any decision they want except if they think the European Court of Human Rights would vote in a completely different way. We have to go with what we believe they would do. And then clause 24 says, if the European Court of Human Rights makes an interim decision, our court is not allowed to act on it. You're like, okay, but what's the what? I mean, that just doesn't make sense. If you're saying we have to do what they're doing, then whether it's an interim decision or a final judgment, if there's a case going through the courts that the judgment is matching what the new interim decision's making, which will then be the final decision, like, why would you have that in? Like, this is just silly. Like, this is just a silly thing that has. Like, there's just no point in this being there. Like, it's just ludicrous. And I had to read it. This is why it's taking me ages. I was like, that can't. it can't really be in there saying, and it's not a you shouldn't, it's you cannot. Like, you cannot bring it in, you can't pass it. So if it's an interim decision and then 6 months later it becomes like an actual decision, anybody who had their case being heard in those previous 6 months would then not have the same rights, even though technically under European law the law's there, but you're not allowed it for 6 months because you're in the United Kingdom, even though you're supposed to be following what the European Court of Human Rights says, but only when it's a final decision. Like, this just doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make any sense, which means it can never ever be interpreted properly in a court of law, right? So you would never be able to go and argue your case, because they would always use one of these random counter arguments. You literally stand there talking around in circles. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Hence me saying it makes no sense. Like, it just doesn't. To have a provision which singles out courts being unable to act upon interim measures when clause 3 insists the UK courts should defer to decisions made, like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, I don't even, and I'm grateful for the, sorry, I'm getting really hot, I'm taking my slippers and socks off. I don't know why I'm getting really hot. I don't know. I'm grateful to the Joint Committee for putting it up there, because otherwise I didn't have freaking noticed. Okay, so number 3, parliamentary scrutiny of human rights. So the question is, the government consultation suggested that the role of Parliament in scrutinising human rights should be strengthened. Would the Bill of Rights achieve this, and how could this be achieved? So my answer, the Bill of Rights does not strengthen the capacity for scrutiny, it weakens it, particularly considering clause 27, which enables the Secretary of State to make further provision that is consequential on this act. That's a quote. The use of further provision rather than amended primary legislation gives the Secretary of State the legal authority to make changes to this Act once passed without needing to follow the affirmative procedure, which needs to go through both houses to be passed. It instead falls under the negative procedure and therefore becomes law the day that it's signed. How can the public or the Joint Committee on Human Rights scrutinise something which has no opportunity to be scrutinised before enactment into law? Okay. So that, it probably sounds like it doesn't make much sense to you guys, right? Because it didn't make much sense to me while I was trying to figure out how to word it. But do you remember when, during the Rona bullshit, that the MPs were getting pissed up in Westminster Bar on a Sunday night, and they were all deciding what they were going to do the next day on, like, literally, and that was happening on a Sunday night, and Monday morning they kind of walked into Parliament and made like a new Rona law. And they announced the Rona law through the media. It never went through Parliament. It was never scrutinised and never checked, right? And they got a major bollocking by the Joint Committee on Human Rights for doing that, because they didn't follow parliamentary procedures. They didn't. They just decided, while pissed, they were going to make a law, and they made the law, announced it, and then people started following it. And because we started following it, because we believed it was a law, it therefore sets precedence and becomes a law. So they got, like, you know, spanked for taking a piss. And so what they're doing now is they're going to put that's okay in law. That's quite literally what they've done. So by using the phrase, this is really, really naughty. By using the phrase further provision rather than amended primary legislation. And this is in the same clause. There is the Secretary of State, further provision. Everybody else, or amending this, is amended primary. So it's quite literally a teeny tiny separate clause specifically referring to the Secretary of State. And those two separate bits in the bill, in this clause, in clause 27, means that outside of the Secretary of State anybody wanting to make any changes to the bill has to use the amended primary legislation and the affirmative procedure, right? So affirmative procedure means it has to go to the House of Commons, then a House of Lords, and then the amendments are passed, right? So they're like, oh shit, we fucked up, we forgot to add this bit in, or this kind of doesn't make sense, or this needs clarifying, it needs to be read, it needs to be passed, everybody needs to check that it's okay, which makes sense, because, you know, sometimes they fuck up. All the time they fuck up. So that makes sense. However, with this sneaky little bit of this clause in, the Secretary of State can quite literally go, right, well, we've now passed this bill, it's all done, it's now in law, and then he could wake up the next morning and be like, oh, do you know what, I just want to add this provision in, and I'm just going to add it in, and then it's law. And it's just no ifs, no buts, and it's tough shit. So that's what that negative procedure means. It just means that the day it's written down and signed by the Secretary of State is the day it becomes law, regardless of who's seen it. There is then 40 days to contest and say, whoa, that's fucked up. But as you'll see as we go through, they removed the rights for us to actually go, that rule's fucked up. Okay, so I want you to understand this clause 27, specifically this bit where the Secretary of State has the power to just amend this law, the Bill of Rights, as he or she sees fit, on a whim, with no repercussion, is the most dangerous thing in there. And FYI, that isn't one of the questions that you're asked. It's also the thing that I spotted first time round that was never brought up by anybody else. Okay, so even all of those organisations that are talking about this, nobody's talking about this very specific legal wording which gives the Secretary of State the power to completely rewrite the bill after it's been passed by the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and nobody can do anything about it. This is like a blank slate. So it's literally giving the Secretary of State the blank slate to do whatever the fuck they want. It's really dangerous. So what you have to do, if you've been like watching other people talking about this shit, you have to ask them why they missed clause 27. Like, why did the lawyers all miss this, right? Okay, so the second part of question 3 is the bill removes the requirement in section 19 of the Human Rights Act for ministers to make a statement as to whether a government bill is compatible with human rights. What impact would this have on parliamentary scrutiny of human rights? So what happens right now is, so basically the government can make any laws they want. Since 1998 and the introduction of the Human Rights Act, they're supposed to make sure that the laws that they pass actually fall inside and fall in line with the human rights. So they're not breaching our human rights. Like that's, they're supposed to go, oh, okay, well, we're going to make this law and then we're just going to check that we're not breaching anybody's human rights, and then we'll pass it. And if it's a law that is completely contradictory to the Human Rights Act, they can still pass it. They just have to like put a statement at the bottom being like, well, it's not compatible. They don't say why. They just say, oh, it's not compatible. So it's tough shit. We're still passing this law, but we're just saying, oh yeah, these are your human rights, but they just don't apply to this law. They don't apply to this law. They don't apply to this law. So they're already quite flippant with what the Human Rights Act actually applies to. But at least all of the laws where it doesn't comply, it kind of tells you at the bottom. And so by having that statement, it gives us an opportunity to be like, what the fuck are you playing at? If they don't have to make that statement, we're never going to know that they're passing laws that aren't compatible. Because if they don't have to, they're not going to. Especially if they're doing dodgy fucking stuff. Like, they ain't going to tell you because they don't want you to notice. Now, at the moment, because they have to put the statement, they usually end up, this is why things take such a long time to go through, because people will, oh, well, you know, well, if you just change it this way, it will be compatible. So there's usually quite a lot of pushback to actually amend all of the laws so they do fall in line with the Human Rights Act. So by having that statement, having to put that statement on, is actually, the Human Rights Act has saved us from a lot of shit. Like, it really is the law. It's why we're still all alive and why I'm able to be relentless and still talk to you guys. But it is the thing that saved us. Over and over again. Okay, so I've just put, you know, if the government's not required to make a statement about compatibility, it's unlikely that any compatibility checks will be done, and will make it harder for both the Joint Committee on Human Rights and members of the public to scrutinise legislation, thus having a detrimental effect on the democratic process. Number 4, interpreting and applying the law compatibly with human rights. So the bill removes the requirement in Section 3 of the Human Rights Act for UK legislation to be interpreted compatibly with convention rights so far as possible. What impact would this have on the protection of human rights in the UK? And so this is kind of a continuance. So what this is saying is no longer, so on the one hand, they no longer have to write a statement to say if it isn't compatible, and now they're also not having to attempt to make the laws compatible. So it's like, we're going to give you this Bill of Rights, but we're going to take away the thing that makes us live by it. So at the moment we have the Human Rights Act, which is there, and it says, and all of your laws need to kind of follow this, and if they can't, you need to tell people. But pretty much all of the laws need to follow this, right? There's no point having this unless you're doing it. And now they want to go, well, we're not going to tell you if it isn't, and actually we're going to take away the part of it that says that we have to even attempt to make it compatible in the first place. So you've got this bill, but it actually doesn't mean anything. It's just a piece of paper that doesn't mean anything at all. It's really bad. So my answer, this gives the government the blanket right to create laws which are contrary to the rights laid out in the bill, therefore effectively eroding those rights. In essence, it makes the human rights protections under the law a non-law, pretty much. So the second part of that question, Clause 40 enables the Secretary of State to make regulations to preserve or restore a judgment that was, I mean, it gets worse, guys. It gets so much worse. A judgment that was made in reliance on Section 3. Do you agree with this approach? What implications does it have for legal certainty and the overall human rights compatibility of the statute book? Okay, so what does this mean? So it's saying at the moment, we've had the Human Rights Act, the laws they've made have to be compatible. If they're not, they have to tell us. They're taking both of those things away for future laws, right? This is saying, and actually, we're going to allow us to change all of the laws we've already just fucking passed. Oh shit, you have no rights. Okay, so they don't even have to go through and create all new laws that are going to be up to date with the fact that we have no human rights. They can literally just turn around and pull out all of the sections which they were forced to put in to make it compatible with the Human Rights Act. Like this, we become China overnight. Like if this passes, we can literally become China overnight, because all they would have to do is run an AI program that runs through the entirety of our legislation.gov.uk, and any point that says amendment made to be compatible with the Human Rights Act, or whatever phrase they've specifically used, is they will just highlight it all, pull it all, and then within 24 hours we are shafted. It's not the same as somebody's going to have to sit down and go through all of those files and check. Like, they would just run an AI program. They probably already fucking know. The moment this passes, 2 minutes later, we're done. You got to ask yourself, like, why isn't the media fucking talking about this shit, right? Why isn't the mainstream media talking about it? Or is it on GMB News? I don't watch that shit, so I won't be able to tell you. Is it on Talk Radio? Don't listen to that shit either. As an aside, this is homemade lime cordial. It with water. We got a glut of limes. Lime cordial is really easy to make. I would prefer it with some gin in right now, but it's not. No gin. Okay, so my response. This is the potential to undo many of the previous provisions which protected human rights across the entire statute book. This provision, coupled with the previously mentioned provision, gives the government a blank check to edit every law that has been passed since 1998, which was passed in such a way to preserve human rights, and enables them to pass new laws without regard for human rights. In one fell swoop, the last 24 years of protections could be undone. And I say could, but let's be honest, it would be undone. They would just get rid of it. So, question 4.3. Clause 5 of the bill would prevent UK courts from applying any new positive obligations adopted by the European Courts of Human Rights following enactment. It also requires the courts, in deciding whether to apply an existing positive obligation, to give great weight to the need to avoid various things, such as requiring the police to protect the rights of criminals and undermining the ability of public authorities to make decisions regarding the allocation of their resources. Is this compatible with the UK's obligation under the Convention? What are the implications for the protection of rights in the UK? Right? And this is just another one of their laws. This is another one of their clauses that runs counter to clause 3 that says you have to follow what they're saying. This is another one they're saying that you're not allowed to follow what they're saying. And you really shouldn't follow what they're saying if it's going to... If they make a positive decision which goes beyond what we're doing, is you then can't follow it. Like, this is just one of those other stupid clauses that would tie you up in a loop in a court, which is why I genuinely think it's in there. I don't understand, like, the lawyers who worked on this should all be sacked, because it makes no fucking sense. So this just says, this runs counter to clause 3, which states UK courts are to adopt interpretation that expand, like, it quite literally says they have to adopt interpretations that expand the protection conferred by the right. Should the court believe the European Court of Human Rights would adopt that interpretation if the case were before. That's the exact wording. And he's saying they shouldn't. Okay, it's just stupid. Cases which have been decided and have a positive obligation at the European Court of Human Rights are clearly ones which the European Court of Human Rights would adopt. It makes no sense. This enables two courts in the UK to deliver two different verdicts, one based on clause 5 and another based on clause 3. This would make justice dependent on your postcode. 4.4. Clause 7 of the bill requires the courts to accept that Parliament, in legislating, considered that the appropriate balance had been struck between different policy aims and rights to give the greatest possible weight to the principle that it's Parliament's role to strike such balances. In your view, does this achieve an appropriate balance between the roles of Parliament and courts? Right, this is the clause. So this is the clause here, clause 7, which is literally taking all of the court's rights away from them to make any decisions and saying Parliament knows best. So they've already dethroned the Queen through what they were doing through the Withdrawal Act, right? They already got rid of her. So now we just have like Parliament, the kind of legislative branch and the judiciary. So executive, legislative and judiciary. And at the moment, everything is being kind of like, the legislative branch is running the country, but nobody's elected them. They're all the kind of little think tanks. They're all the civil servants. Like, they're the people who are running the country, because they are just like putting something's getting passed in Parliament, and then they're changing shit afterwards. And now this is what they're doing now, is attempting to take the court's rights to make court decisions based on if the government creates a law, which is just fucking insane. Right now we have an opportunity to do a judicial review, to go to the courts and be like, what the fuck, somebody needs to sort this shit out, right? And then the courts go, let's do this. And what this is going to say is, nah, it's tough shit. We have made the decisions. We've already checked everything. You little stupid people have got no idea. Like, we know best. You can't change anything. It's tough shit. This is what this clause is about. So clause 7 removes the court's right to uphold justice based on their legal interpretation of the laws, and instead gives Parliament powers to rival any dictatorship. It is stating that what Parliament believes is correct and should be treated as the authority, without any opportunity for redress. Members of Parliament are not experts in chosen fields. They do not often have backgrounds in law, and many have humble beginnings with no understanding of how to govern a country. Like, this is true. This is what everybody seems to forget. Like, MPs are just random fucking people who have been elected but don't know anything. This is why you have the balance of power. Like, you have the elected people who are supposed to have the interests of the people at heart, but they actually know nothing. You have the legislative branch who have the knowledge, but are all out for themselves. And then you have the judiciary who's supposed to kind of like weigh it all up and be like, I don't care what you say, the law is the law. Like, this is quite literally what this law says, is you can't like go outside this. So when they're all working, they work quite well. When they're not working, it doesn't work at all. So members of Parliament are lay people. This is going in. Are lay people who've been elected based on a perceived likeable character. In contrast, members of the courts are experts in law and will therefore always have a far superior knowledge in this compared to members of Parliament. Parliament has no right to state that they and they alone can decide what's best for the people. Laws are decided in truth inside courts of law because the people bring those cases to the forefront. Giving Parliament the greatest possible weight removes any opportunity for a member of the public to challenge irresponsible, ill-conceived or completely illogical laws. Okay, so that's what happens, is Parliament creates a law, it kind of goes out there, we interpret it in our daily lives. Sometimes the police come along and go, well, you've interpreted it incorrectly, we're going to arrest you, and then you go to court and the lawyers battle it out, and then the jury and people go, actually, I think they were fine, so no. And then we embed case law. Like, it's our case law that is the thing that kind of governs our lives, and the opportunity for people to create case law is being removed. When it comes to human rights, but actually I think they're just trying to do it across the board. I think they're just going to be like, oh well, this law says this and we're just going to apply it to everything, right? That's what they'll do, is it will just be applied to everything. Because they're arseholes. 4.5, Clause 12 would replace the current duty in Section 6 of the Human Rights Act on public authorities to act compatibly with human rights unless they're required to do otherwise as a result of legislation. In the absence of the obligation to read legislation compatibly with convention rights, what impact would Clause 12 have on an individual's accessing public service and public authorities? So my response, Clause 12 gives public authorities the same sweeping rights as Clause 3 and Clause 5 give the government. If enacted, public authorities can simply decide to no longer carry out their duties in line with the Convention by stating the public authority could not have acted differently. This single phrase enables every single public authority to remove care, close provisions, and leave vulnerable people with no one to turn to. I perceive every single public authority budget cutting services, every single budget, there we go, cutting services with a single statement as reasoning, unable to act differently due to financial pressures. They quite literally just have to say, we can't do that because we were unable to act differently. Like, they don't even need to give a reason. Like, if you have somebody who's in a care home and then they just be like, oh, well, we're no longer going to fund the care homes because we are unable to act differently because we have no money. It's just tough shit. There's no recourse. Literally, it's just horrific. You call an ambulance. Oh no, you're just gonna have to die in your bed because we're unable to act differently because there's no money. Police officer, can you come out and investigate this murder? Well, we're unable to act differently because I'm not going to protect your human right. No, I don't really care that you've just been raped. No, I don't really care that somebody's like coming into your house with a machete. Well, we don't have the money, we're not coming, right? Like, and there will be no recourse. So at the moment, if they're negligent, or if they are, you know, misconduct because they should have and they didn't, they'll be like, oh well. So basically, we're going to then be paying all of the public services to, much like over the Rona, where we paid them all to do nothing, we are going to continue to pay them all to do even more nothing. And when we say something about it, we have no recourse. This is so bad. This thing is so bad. Number 5, enforcement of human rights and litigation and remedies. So 5.1. Does the system of human rights protection envisaged by the bill ensure effective enforcement of human rights in the UK, including the right to an effective remedy? Which is Article 13. No. In a nutshell, no. It removes the need of any enforcement from the very top of government through to every single tax funded service. Having Parliament's decision being given extra weight removes the people's opportunity to challenge anything in the courts. This Bill of Rights gives the people of the UK rights on paper only. It's really bad. Number 5.2. Do you think the proposed changes to bringing proceedings and securing remedies for human rights breaches in clauses 15 to 18 of the bill will dissuade individuals from using the courts to seek an effective remedy as guaranteed by Article 13? So clause 15 in essence, so it says 15 to 18, but it's a 16, there's part of it's about the military, so it's just, and they ask about those separately anyway, so I didn't put them in here, if you're wondering why I haven't. So clause 15 in essence requests an individual to prove to the court that they are a victim and or have suffered before they're able to bring proceedings. However, in clause 7, Parliament has stated their decisions hold more weight than the courts. Parliament has already made a decision in creating the law, therefore the result has already been decided. This means no one will be able to prove that they're a victim or have suffered, and therefore the courts will have no choice but to reject any permission to bring proceedings against any acts or proposed acts. Every single thing that's passed by Parliament will become law and will never be able to be challenged by members of the public, right? So clause 15, it says that should I decide that the government has gone bonkers and made a really dodgy law that's going to affect me, I have to go to court to prove what they're doing, it has affected me. They have to accept that that's going to happen, and then I'm allowed to go to court to challenge the government, right? But because we've already seen the government have said, when it comes to laws, they know best, and basically you can't challenge me, the courts will never be able to say you're right, because the government now have ultimate rights over what's like. Do you see how this doesn't, like, you can't do that? You can't prove that you're a victim. You would prove that you're a victim, but the courts will be like, oh, well, the government has the ultimate right to decide what they're putting, and they've said this is the fact, so it's tough shit. Doesn't matter that you're a victim, going to be a victim, you're suffering, you're going to suffer, because the government's already decided this is the case, because they've already taken everything into account, and you must just be, what's that phrase they use? Like, it just, on the fringes, it's going to happen to a certain number of people, like casualty of war, an acceptable level of issue, like, you know, there's a certain amount of people who are just going to, you know, freeze to death, and that's okay as long as it doesn't go across this random line we've drawn in the sand, right? So it's just, I don't understand how this is even got to where it's got to, with being just fucking insane. And I think this is probably why the good people have been so shocked that it is still continuing, because it's just fucking insane, this thing. 100% I pal. I mean, the difference between the US and the UK at the minute is we had the Human Rights Act, and so they weren't able to do the crazy shit in the same way as what was going on in the USA, because we had the Human Rights Act, and I know you had I know you've got your Constitution, and I know you've got your Bill of Rights, but they weren't. They're still quite woolly. So the Human Rights Act were really frickin' explicit. You cannot, right? So that's all it was. It's like from 1998 it became really explicit about what they were not allowed to get away with doing. And more so, yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that they shouldn't have been able to do because of your Constitution, and people just weren't pulling them up on it. It is insane, but we were pulling them up on it. I don't know. I think that's what's confused me about the USA and this shit show, because you do have the Constitution. Your Constitution is pretty freaking strong, but there was no challenges to anything that was being done, even though it is unconstitutional. Not real. There were no real kind of challenges happening. Everybody was just allowing all this shit to happen. Hey Margaret! Oh, I meant to say to you the other day when you kind of dropped that, earlier when you dropped that 6 million Jew thing, I hope you're you know, better and recovering, and you know, it's been a few months, but hopefully you're kind of out of the worst and back on your feet. So 5.3, so do you agree that the court should be required to take into account any relevant conduct of the victim, even if unrelated to the claim, and or the potential impact on public services when considering damages? Okay, so this is basically saying along the lines of, if a prostitute is raped, then it's kind of tough shit because they're a prostitute. If a criminal went to prison, did their time, came back out, completely reformed, has a crime committed against them, they don't get the same rights because, you know, they were a criminal, right, in their past. So this is basically saying that we are we're having an underclass of citizen where your character, so how you're perceived in society. So you might have just, I mean I've got a criminal record. So that's me having no rights because I got a criminal record. my criminal record was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it made me sort my life out. I remember somebody telling me, do you need to stop telling people that, because they're going to think it's a good idea to get a criminal. I'll be like, no, because like people shouldn't need to get that far. And had I had the help and support that I needed for all of the shit that I went through, then I wouldn't have ended up in that place. But people make mistakes, and if you commit a crime, you are punished for that crime. You're not punished for the rest of your life once you're rejoined society and you're a free person. I mean, I've not been to prison. So my response, no, justice should be blind. And this is like, anyway, there's 100% believe this. Justice should be blind to both the perpetrators and the victims. Cases should always be decided upon the facts in the case and in the eyes of the law, not dependent on who is committing the crime and who is the victim. Because this will go back to, I perceive this as a way out for the cabal, for all of the horrific acts that they have done on children who potentially have then become offenders. You know, they're an offender, that they don't have a right to be a victim. Like, it's just like, nobody has the right to cause you harm or harm your property. And if you do it to somebody else, you get punished for it, but it then doesn't mean that people can, like, this is just bad. Because people get, innocent people get convicted all the time as well, right? They can fake shit, you know, they can jump onto my computer and turn me into a paedophile. I'm not, but they can. And even if that then, you know, 10 years later I was able to prove that it was all faked, it doesn't mean that some other people aren't going to believe it, and therefore I don't get no right. Like, it just, justice is blind. That's it. It's just like, you either believe in the criminal justice system or you don't. I 100% believe we all have the right to do whatever the fuck we want, right? 100% free will. I can do whatever I want. If I want to go outside and murder somebody, I absolutely can. I don't believe I should. And I do believe that we live in a moral society where, should I harm another person or their property, I absolutely should face consequences in a moral capacity, so that we live in a society where we're nice and kind and it's a great place to live. But I could go do that. I have the free will to go and do that. My stupid decision to go and do that or not. But if I do something stupid, I'm not a subhuman. I'm just somebody who's made a different decision. This is really bad. All those people who are stealing to eat, who then become victims. Well, you know, they're a thief. They're a junkie because their life has been so horrific. They have to shoot heroin up to blot it out, but they're a junkie, so they don't deserve any protections. Like, this is just dodgy as fuck. All of it. This entire thing. It's so bad. So 6. Specific issues. Clause 6 of the bill would require the court, when deciding whether certain human rights of prisoners have been breached, to give the greatest possible weight to the importance of reducing the risk to the public from persons given custodial sentences. What effect would this clause have on the enforcement of rights by prisoners? So this is, when you look at the actual clause 6, it's saying that if in the clauses, like, if a prisoner's human rights is breached, then they could potentially you'd be released or go to a lower category prison. And what the court should do is they should weigh up everybody else's rights against that one individual's. Okay? And on the surface, this looks like a really sensible thing to do, right? So if you think about the transgender men who say their human rights are being breached because they're being put in a male prison, so they were being put in female prisons and they were raping female prisoners. So now we're changing the law that they are not, biological males are not allowed to be housed with biological females, right? Which makes sense. But we have to be careful because we shouldn't be breaching anybody's human rights. I mean, there is the clause that if you go to prison, if you are committed, if you commit an offence and you are given a custodial sentence, then your right to liberty is removed, i.e. you're put in a prison and you're not allowed to vote. Like, you are being removed from society for the time that you are in prison, right? That's the only right. You can still think what you want, you can still like believe what you want, you can still you know, freedom of religion, respect to private life, all of those things you still have. You just removed from society from one teeny tiny period, because that's the punishment, is you're not allowed to be a member of society, right? But outside that, you still have all of your rights, i.e. not to be harmed, not to undergo torture, all of these things. And that should be the case. We shouldn't be breaching people's human rights, but it shouldn't be an either or. It shouldn't be we're going to protect these people and not this one. They need to figure this shit out so everybody's looked after. So if we can't house transgender men in prisons with women because they are raping them, if they are adamant they are I mean, we need to sort this entire trans bullshit out. I'm just using this as an experience, and those of you who've been here for a while know my opinion on this whole transgender bullshit anyway. And if you didn't, you probably do now, and we're calling it transgender bullshit. But they don't then have to go into a male prison. There should be some place for them. Like, it shouldn't be either or. We're not going to release these people. We're not going to keep somebody locked up like Charles Bronson for, like, he's on a whole life sentence, and there's somebody else who's on a whole life sentence as well for the crime that they committed. And had they committed the crime nowadays, they maybe would have got like a couple of years, right? His human, like, he's not even a danger to the public. But it doesn't have to be an either or. Like, that doesn't make sense. We have to be really careful about any kind of creeping allowances for breaching somebody's human rights. Because if they say, well, we can breach your human rights because we need to protect the rest of the public, then they can say things along the lines of, well, we can also breach your human rights, Katie, because and we can remove your capacity to talk to anybody else because you are a danger to the public. You are a risk because you are spreading dangerous ideas. Ugh. Was a man, now a woman, and is attracted to women. Like, but you're not a lesbian. You're not a lesbian, you're just a man. Like, nobody can stand there and nobody can say, I feel like I'm supposed to be a man, because you don't know what being a man feels like because you're a woman. And if you're a man, you don't know what feeling like a woman feels like because you're a man. and you've never not been a man, like, it's called gender dysmorphia. And 99% of the people who are swapping genders don't even have gender dysmorphia. They have low self-esteem, they have no identity, they are confused as fuck because society's made them confused. They don't actually feel, oh my god. I feel really bad for the lesbians and the gays. I really do feel bad for the lesbians and the gays. The gays. Like, I mean, that's a bit condescending, isn't it? But I didn't mean it like that. But I just meant, like, they're, like, I mean, behind the fact that 50% of the population are no longer allowed to call themselves, are allowed to identify as women, because we have to identify as a cis woman. Like, I mean, obviously, women first, who don't exist. But I do feel really sorry for gays and lesbians, because the implication is you're not gay, you're not a lesbian, is you are in the wrong body and you're supposed to be the other gender. Like, this is dodgy fucking implications. Anyway, so we have to be careful about allowing any kind of erosion of human rights, especially for the protection of public. Like, this is quite literally what we've just lived through in COVID. This is dangerous. So I've just put, like, even those undergoing a custodial sentence have the right to be protected from harm, rather than weighing up whether an individual prisoner's rights are worth more or less than those of the public, and it being an either or decision. It's probably going to tell me to put one of those in. There should be adequate provision to protect both those carrying out a custodial sentence and the public. Like, that's the point. And just sort the prisons out. I mean, we do it for child abusers. Like, they have a separate place in prison. Like, they're not usually put in general population because they will get murdered, right? So if you can do it for somebody in general, like a paedophile, you can do it for a man who's deciding he wants to be a woman, so he can go to a women's prison and rape. I mean, we already do it, right? And we should just, it should be, it's not an either or. It's not an either or. So clause 8 and 20 of the bill restrict the application of articles 8. This is, I know you guys are you're not going to be happy with my response, but it's okay. Restrict the application of articles 8, so the right to private and family life, and 6, the right to a fair trial in deportation cases. Do you think these provisions are compatible with the ECHR? Okay, so I just want to pre-frame my response, okay? I want you guys to understand that this is part of the PSYOP, right? The PSYOP at the moment, where we've got illegals after illegals landing on the shores of Dover. They're all being housed in, you know, hotels. They've been given phones, like all of this stuff, and all of our veterans are not getting fed. We've got all of these homeless. I love the phrase Indigenous people, because that's what we are. Right, all of the citizens are being ignored and can't afford to heat their homes. They can't afford to eat, like, and so that entire PSYOP is being created and strengthened, and the only thing that's really being talked about is this part. Okay, because we have all the criminals, we have the Rwanda shit, we have the empty planes where we're trying to deport people, and we've got dickheads like Cherie Blair getting them off on human rights, right? All of this is being done on purpose so that people want this Bill of Human Rights to go through because of this clause, and they don't understand this clause properly, right? Don't understand the implications of this clause. On the surface, it looks like if you've come over here and you've committed a crime, you don't deserve a jury trial. You don't deserve a fair trial. You should just be Oh, good. Thanks, Margaret. Glad to hear it. Is you don't deserve. You should just be deported. Like, I don't give a shit. You should just fucking go. Which sounds great, right? It does sound great. It's not what's really going to happen. It's not what's really going to happen. It's not really the point of this. And it's also really dangerous because it's anything that's creeping. I want you to really hold on to the fact. Any singling out and non-blanket application of the Human Rights Act or the Bill of Rights as they're trying to state it sets precedent for it not being an automatic fundamental right. If it is applied to everybody, no matter what, there is no quibbling, is you have it. You have it regardless. And that means the sick fucks who are doing disgusting things to children also deserve to be treated as innocent until proven guilty. Like, I stand by that. 100%. I will find the evidence. But everybody has to be treated innocent until proven guilty, because that's the law and that's how it should be. You aren't guilty of a crime until you've been committed of the crime. And so the problem with this clause is it's preventing somebody from being treated as innocent. Okay? Because it's removing their right to a fair trial, which means they have not been committed of an offence yet. And need to be deported, right? Because it's not after the trial are we then going to remove the protection of the Human Rights Act and we're going to fuck them off. That's different. I mean, I still don't think we should do that, but that's not what this question's asking. This question is asking before we have determined whether somebody should be deported, we are not going to give them the opportunity to be innocent until proven guilty. So the whole, right to private and family life, right? Why wouldn't they be allowed that? I mean, everybody has the right to private and family life, right? As long as it doesn't run, as long as what you're doing behind closed doors isn't illegal, like you still have those laws. I.e., I have a right to private and family life, but it doesn't mean I can beat the shit out of Matt every night and be like, oh, well, it's just my custom, because it's a law that I don't beat the shit out of Matt every night. Because if we break, that's domestic violence, that's a law. So the Human Rights Act, your human rights don't supersede other laws, and this is what I'm telling you is part of the psyop. All of the stuff that they've been doing with the terrorists who aren't deported, the murderers who aren't deported, is the courts have allowed their human rights to supersede the fact that they have committed a crime. And that doesn't happen in other cases. It doesn't happen in other cases. And it's nothing wrong with the Human Rights Act. That's the dodgy fucking lawyers and judges who are trying those cases. That's what's going on there. It's not the Human Rights Act. And in fact, in the initial the earlier consultation, they've already closed the loops in the law to stop that shit happening in the trials. I mean, so if you've noticed, all of the media, they've changed what they're talking about. They're no longer talking about them getting off for human rights in court. We're just struggling to deport them. And this doesn't address that issue anyway. This is what hopefully you guys, I'm trying to help you understand the question, which may help you understand my response. Because if you want to answer this question, you've got to make sure that you actually understand what they're asking you, rather than read it and assume, make an assumption based on what the media is kind of perpetuating. This question is quite literally, you don't have a right to a fair trial in a deportation case. If you haven't had a fair trial, how do you know that you should be deported? Like, you can't do that. Okay? So my response, no. All people, while on UK soil, should be treated to the same rights as citizens of the United Kingdom. And just so you know, guys, like, that is something that has been embedded in the foundation and pillars of our justice system for 1500 years. They are old laws. Yeah, everybody talks about common law, the actual common laws of the land. Like, this is one of our foundations. If anybody was on British soil, English soil back then, is they were treated the same. They had the same rights. Which is why this is why our country's always been the one that everybody fucking comes to. Is because you always have the same. You're protected. So we can't get rid of that. That is, anybody who wants everybody's talking about common law and you know, are you know, going back to the good old age of the past. Like, that law has always been, that's been there for fucking donkey's years. And if you read the historical law books, they talk about that. And I mean, it is, you know, knocking around in the statute book somewhere. But I haven't looked it out. But I've read 2 or 3 old historic books. So while I've been trying to brush up on the law, it was a surprise that is not a new law. That is something that we've had for like that over 1,000 years. This includes, but here's the clincher, right? This is what's not happening. This is the equal application of laws across the United Kingdom. So this includes the consequences for breaking criminal laws. Should someone from another country with different laws and cultures behave in ways which are legal in their country but illegal in the United Kingdom, they should face the weight of the criminal justice system, the same as a citizen of the UK. It's got to be blanket. The ECHR has no lawful right to override criminal punishments once a conviction has occurred. Prior to conviction, all are presumed innocent, and therefore all have the right to be treated as such and given the same rights in law, including a fair, I've got to submit this afterwards, trial. So the only reason I perceive them mentioning the right to family life will be because in some cultures, you know, you've got FGM. That's a law. That's illegal. If the family members have been found if a child shows up in A&E after they've been mutilated, those parents should be in prison. This isn't happening. So we do not have the equal application of the law across all cultures. Because people are using the right to, they have been using the right to a private life, right, as a reason. No, but you broke the law. I can't murder Matt and be like, well, you know, I've got a private life. Oh well. You just can't fucking do that shit. So, but they have been, and they've been allowed to. Like, they're enacting Sharia law in certain parts of the UK, and it does happen. There are certain places in the UK where Sharia law is the law. That runs counter to our criminal law. That shouldn't be happening, and it's that shit that shouldn't be happening. Not we take away the rights of citizens, and this also means that anybody who rocks up at Dover without a fucking passport goes straight to a prison because they've broken a law. Like, if we were actually applying the laws that we haven't at our disposal, we wouldn't be in the shit show we're in. This is why this is a big, huge part of the PSYOP. They want to change it. Law that's been for thousands of years, biblical, universal, a big... to be fair, Penelope, I think it's probably one that came from the creation of the British Isles when they showed up, the White Isles, because we came over, didn't we, from Troy. We stayed and then showed up, so, and that was reading that really old historical book. I think you found it. And so that's one of the original 13 families, and that was embedded in their ethos. So I would say it's probably a big G law that used to apply across the world, and potentially because we were an island and quite isolated for a while, it just stayed. I don't know, but it's been a bedrock of the. I mean, I can say definitely 1500 years, because that's when it was. When they kind of created common law, which is laws common to all of England, which was when they kind of just joined it all. Like it was in then, like it's written down from then, but it was already there as a law. It just wasn't formally written down. Yeah. But yeah, so I think that's. Okay. Okay, so clause 14 introduces a total ban on individuals bringing human rights claim or relying on a convention right in relation to overseas military operations, subject to the Secretary of State being satisfied that it's compatible with the UK's obligations under the convention. Does this comply with the UK's obligations under the ECHR and international law? If not, what would need to be amended to ensure clause 14 is consistent with the UK's obligation under the convention? So it basically says it's basically saying our military, while abroad, can commit atrocious acts. It's tough shit because they're not on British soil, but they've already got away with doing this in some places. So these are like blue helmet territory, right? But also, if you are a member of the military and you are out there and you have your rights eroded, i.e. your capacity to speak freely is curtailed because they don't want you telling on the dodgy shit that's going on, or whistleblowing, and so equally you're not allowed to say anything because it's a military operation. So it's my belief that's what this is about. So my response, there should be no limitations on a person's human rights. If you're a citizen of the United Kingdom and subject to her laws while under the direction of the military on our shores and off, then you as a citizen of the United Kingdom have the right to bring a human rights claim. Either the laws apply or they do not. It cannot be a case of picking and choosing which laws are applicable, especially if the only laws which are applicable favour institutions which are funded by the grace of the government. So it's just it doesn't work. Fuck it. So the bill introduces a limited right to trial by jury. What would be the legal significance of this right? And going back 1500 years at least, we've had the right to a trial by jury embedded in our system of law. This is like old old. And it used to be like the entire town would show up. It never used to be 12. It only became 12 when they created common law, and it was common to throughout England, and it was just England at the time, right? Before then, it used to be like the entire town and village would decide guilt or innocence, and they made it 12, and 12 of your peers, just for uniformity. So before the 12, there was still a jury, and it was like whoever wanted to be on could decide. Like, you all got to say. It was quite interesting. I mean, reading like the original, like where our laws came, is quite interesting. But yeah, so this is old. This is something else that's fundamental. You want to talk about culture, right? Like, these are cultural things that they want to remove. If you want to get patriotic about it, I want you to be very careful about saying, well, actually, terrorists shouldn't have a jury. Shamima Begum doesn't have a right. I want to hear what she's got to fucking say. Like, if they won't let her, I want to know. We'll talk about somebody else in a minute who's never had a trial and never had a jury. Is currently sat in prison lots of times, right? And they did this over COVID. Is they took the juries away. They did this over COVID. Now, I also think one of the reasons they will want to remove the jury is if we start managing to arrest all the dodgy fucking politicians and there's no jury, and it's like dodgy lawyers arguing the cases. Oh, look, he was found innocent, not guilty. We don't have, like, they can exclude the press, they can exclude members of the public, they can stop reporting on things. Is you would have completely secret, like, this is just like a closed secret decisions. So this runs counter to 100. I put hundreds because I couldn't find the page that had the specific date, but it's over 1500 years. This runs counter to hundreds of years worth of rights and should not even be entertained as a serious suggestion. Like, I mean, it really is. You can tell that I'm getting to that point. You're like, are you fucking kidding me that this is even a real thing? So the day something as unjust as this becomes law in the UK is the day democracy will truly have died. It is the jurors who decide what is and what is not an accurate interpretation of the law. This is not only a fundamental principle embedded into our courts, but also something we've spent hundreds of years encouraging other countries to adopt because of its importance, right? We would be the biggest fucking hypocrites in the entire world by, going to other countries and being like, oh, you need to have a democracy, you need to have a jury, you need to make it fair. Oh, well, actually, we're going to take our juries away because we just want to arrest all these fuckers. Like, do you see, like, this is just, like, just stupid suggestion. This is just a stupid idea. Stupid idea. That somehow has got past its first reading. This is just nuts. It's just nuts. 6.5. The bill strengthens protection for freedom of speech with specific exemptions for criminal proceedings, breach of confidence, questions relating to immigration and citizenship. Like, you're not actually... So what they're saying is you're no longer allowed to talk about immigration, citizenship, or criminal proceedings, or a breach of confidence, i.e. if you think the government's shit, and national security, right? You're no longer going to be able to talk about those things. Do you think this is necessary? And what would be the implications of giving certain forms of speech greater protection than other rights? My answer: this is strengthened protection in name only. Arguments can be made that any speech which is not appropriate falls under the exempted categories and is therefore outlawed. Free speech is just that, the right to speak freely. Should you not be breaking an actual criminal law, such as threatening someone harm, then you should have the right to say, think and believe whatever you choose. I stand by that. Like, if you want to call me a fucking idiot, go for it. If you then want to say you're a fucking idiot, I'm going to come around your house and rip your throat out, that's a threat against my life, and I'm going to tell the police, right? It's different. Like, you can think whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. But if you're threatening and calling me a ginger twat, like, well, it does have everything to do with individual free speech. It's the right to speak freely, regardless about what it is, about everything. We all have the right, and it is enshrined in law at the minute in the UK, but they want to remove it. So you can't have a free speech law, but dictate the realms of what's allowed to be talked about. Like, that's not right. So there's a difference between breaking a law and threatening to do harm. Okay, well, we're talking about UK laws, not USA. So we don't have federal bodies. This is our Bill of Rights that we're running through, where they're quite literally deciding to change the law so that we have free speech around certain subjects, and we will not be allowed to speak freely about these certain things. So, I mean, you missed the beginning, mate. It's alright. No. I 100% agree with you. So this is like, so where we are today, as of right now, I can say whatever I want as long as I'm not harming anyone. Our new Bill of Rights that they want to bring in will not allow me to speak. Well, if I speak about, we go, roll back. The bill is introducing a protection for freedom of speech, except if I'm talking about criminal proceedings, breach of confidence, that'll be about the government, questions relating to immigration, citizenship and national security. Yeah, so they are curtailing our capacity to speak and saying they're bolstering it. It's alright, View, no worries. It confused me. It helped when you said federal. I was like, oh, wait a minute, I know it, yeah. Okay, so 6.6. Why do you think the government has chosen to protect freedom of speech rather than freedom of expression as guaranteed in Article 10? And what are the implications of treating the elements of Article 10 differently? So, the response: the government is hoping that by removing the right to freedom of expression and introducing the police and crime bill, the ability of somebody to protest is completely diminished. So many will take to social media and other platforms of speech, believing that their right is protected. However, as we've seen under the COVID-19 pandemic, the social media organisations have worked hand in hand with our government and governments across the world to silence people and effectively unperson people with an opposing viewpoint. This new provision stops people from having their voice heard and members of the public being able to come together and to have their voices heard in a unified manner. This is an illusion of a protection while completely removing any real capacity the public has to join together and pursue a common goal. The idea that the government is attempting to bolster free speech in this way is laughable, At present, Julian Assange, a journalist who's been convicted of no crime, is being isolated in Belmarsh prison for the very act of speaking out and showing the truth. If this was something the government was genuinely interested in doing, Julian Assange would not be in prison. If this was something the government was honestly considering in earnest, there would be no such thing as a D-notice, which is actively used to silence members of the press from speaking out. Until Julian Assange is free, D-notices are disbanded and all government contracts with corporations enabling them to remove people for their views are ended. There will continue to be no free speech in the United Kingdom. Right. So we have to remember that the police. So do you remember when we were talking about they were bringing the bill in before, and I was saying this is really fucking sneaky, because they are bolstering free speech and they are pretending the freedom of expression it is a non-thing, because in the police and crime bill is they're not allowing gatherings of more than 2 people, and you can stop a protest if it's too noisy, right? So they, in the one law they've already brought in, they have brought in laws which block you from being able to assemble. So you can't come together outside of social media because you're not allowed. At the moment they can't enforce that because the Human Rights Act says we have the freedom to do that. So once the human rights go, we can't then assemble because the police and crime bill says you're not allowed. They already have in place removing you from the internet if you're saying bad words like the Rona. And then they're going to bring in on top is you're not allowed to talk about these things. So you're not allowed to talk about these things like anywhere. We're not going to allow you to talk on the internet because we're just going to keep removing you all from the internet. And we're also not going to allow you to talk in public. So by completely blocking people's ability to have a conversation with somebody else about a common goal, is we then become powerless to do anything. And for those of you who didn't know, like the D-notice is a real thing. Like if members of the media have a piece of information they want to bring out, the government gets wind of it, they say, oh, you can't because of national security. Even if it's got nothing to do with national security, which is one of the things that they're bringing into the free speech exemption, national security, right? You can't talk about that, national security. It's just bullshit. So it will stop citizen journalists completely. As well. So nobody will be able to talk, nobody will be able to have conversations, you won't be able to say it on the internet because the internet will remove you, you won't be able to do it in public because the police will come and rock up at your door and say you're being too noisy. And these are the last questions. Number 7, the Human Rights Act and the Devolved Nations. So 7.1, how would repealing the Human Rights Act and replacing it with the Bill of Rights as proposed impact human rights protections in Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales? So it would have the same atrocious impact on Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales as it will do for those that are in England. It will completely remove any provision of human rights and replace it with contradictory legislation which gives over power to Parliament. 7.2, should the government seek consent from the devolved legislators before enacting the bill, and if so, why? Right? This question is probably the one that pissed me off the most. Like, our Parliament shouldn't have to get consent from Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland in order to enact something in England, right? So that pissed me off. Like, I don't want them to enact this, but it's got nothing to do with Scotland. Yes, it is going to be forced on them as well. But if we're not going to have a separate England-based consultation, then why would they get a separate one, right? Like, that just really pissed me off. Obviously, I don't swear in my official responses. So not as a separate provision. Their preferences should not hold more weight than those in England. All should hold equal weight. All people of the United Kingdom should have the same opportunities to oppose any changes via the consultation process. And they have, right? The consultation process response is open to anybody in the United Kingdom. Anybody. It sets really bad precedents, and I will be really fucking grateful on one hand but pissed off on another if this gets passed and then Scotland turn around and be like, well, we don't fucking want it, so you can't do it, and then it gets stopped because Scotland has got no right to dictate what happens in England, right? And I was born as, like, I'm Scottish, I live in England. Irish family, right? Just, it was really pissed me off. Okay, so we've been having on for a while. Didn't give me the numbers. Where are my numbers? I don't know. An hour and a half, maybe. Oh yeah, an hour and 48. Okay, so I hope that has helped some of you guys who were reading through those questions and going, like, this makes no sense, because it doesn't make much sense. And the reason why it doesn't make much sense is because they are doing so much fuckery behind the scenes. So much fuckery. Just, the more I read, the more angry I got. Like, I don't, there's like no other way of kind of explaining that. And so I'm so grateful for the Joint Committee on Human Rights for doing this added consultation step. I'm also quite concerned because we do have a new chair. So we had the other chair and they were like really anti this Bill of Rights. I watched a couple of the kind of she led consultations with experts, and you could see that she was really not happy with this bullshit, right? She was taking no prisoners with allowing the government to do this stuff, and had been leading the way. And all of a sudden, like a couple of weeks ago, we got a new chair of that committee, and I'm concerned that the new chair is probably being selected to make sure that it goes through. Okay, but hopefully, so once I have red and green should never be seen except on a beautiful Irish cully. Or Scottish. I'm not wearing red today. I gotta go just green. So I will upload that to the drive, so you can all read it and have my copy. So all I'm going to do now, so I haven't submitted it yet because I wanted to kind of come on live and walk you through that. And we'll talk about the other bits like in a sec. So we'll upload it. I will just be probably fixing spell. Oh, Ginger. Thanks. Thanks. I will I will upload it. I will probably just be fixing spelling mistakes, but I won't be changing the content. So it's just, hopefully you understand the questions, hopefully you understand the implications of the questions, so you have an opportunity to kind of put your 10 cents forward. Even if you don't answer those questions, please do make sure you fill in the survey. There's probably some on there that have got you quite fired up. I would urge everybody, if you do answer no other questions, please do answer the one that's asking about free speech and put in there somewhere about Julian Assange. Okay? He's being held in our prisons, and so once you submit your stuff, they will go through it and they will decide whether they accept it or not. And so be polite, make sense, don't just rant. I mean, I got a little bit ranty, but they will accept it, and then it goes as a permanent record and is a public permanent record, right? That you have spoke about this. So if everybody's kind of put in like Julian Assange in there, I mean, it might go to, I mean, he's not, I don't know. Okay, so that brings us just quickly onto the petition. So I did set up a petition to have him pardoned by the royal pardon, and the response was, you can't do a name, right? You can't pick a name. However, thank you very much to Shirley, because that's bullshit, because Alan Turing was granted a royal pardon, and there is a petition which literally says grant Alan Turing a royal petition. So it's got his name. It's quite literally worded different. It's quite literally worded the same. The problem is there's no way to appeal that decision. There's no way for me to reply to those people. There's no way for me to get hold of anybody. And if you try to submit a petition that's the same or similar to one that's already been rejected, you get rejected. So I want you to know that I haven't given up doing that. I just need to figure out how to get in touch with somebody to get that petition reinstated, because it's been rejected and it shouldn't have been. Because I can't do another one, because the other one will automatically be rejected because it's already been rejected before. Like I've been through that loop. So I want to say thank you to Shirley for finding the Alan Turing thing. So there's precedence that they've done it. So we were also wondering, maybe it's because he's Australian, but Australia is still part of the Commonwealth, so you can still have a Queen. It would still be a Queen's pardon. I mean, I know lots of places have left the Commonwealth, but I don't think Australia have yet. I think they're still part of the Commonwealth, so it still falls under the Queen. So technically, he's still under the Queen. But potentially, if anybody's watching from Australia, maybe you can do a petition your government to petition the Queen as well. Would be handy. And actually, anyone from any of the Commonwealth countries, if you petition your individual government to petition the Queen, and if you go on to gov.uk petitions, you'll see the one for Alan Turing, and if you kind of like, I can show you it. I think I've got it open on one of my 100 tabs. One of my 100 tabs. There we go. And it only got 37,000 signatures, right? This petition. Oh, I'm getting good at this now, aren't I? See, it's there. Grant a pardon to Alan Turing. Yep. So, it's already there. So, on to the next thing that we're going to be chatting about. Oh shit, Anthenos is posting stuff. I'll have to have a look in a second. So, okay, let's do blood stuff first, because that's kind of shorter. Oh, there we go. There we go. I've bookmarked my little things. So on Monday, I was doing work for. I am still trying to do the injunctions. I am still trying to do it, but obviously, the human rights thing, it takes precedent. Like all of these little fucking curveball shit, sideball things that keep popping up, have got to come before, and then I am like the only one who's earning in our household at the moment, so I haven't won the lottery yet. So I would love to not be working and just do this, but it isn't what I do, and I don't take money for this. One, because it enables me to talk about whatever I want to talk about, but two is, I'm not being paid by anybody. So I have no agenda other than I want us all to survive. Okay, so one of the things that Tori talks about a lot is, was talking about a lot, was like mitochondrial DNA. And how, so mitochondrial DNA is the DNA that's passed down the female line, but passed from mother to father, but never passed it as part of father DNA. It's only passed like from mum to daughter, from mum to son, and then as daughter grows up and has kids, something like that. So it's like mother-based DNA, and she talks about mother-based DNA a lot. And I was kind of looking into mitochondrial DNA, trying to figure out what it does. Like what is the purpose of it? Why is it knocking around in our system? And I've always I've always wondered, like, what is old age, right? So if you read the Bible, and I don't read the Bible, but I've heard stories, back in the day, people were living for like hundreds of years. So what changed? What happened? Why all of a sudden did we stop living so long? Yes, famines and disease and all of those things, but why did we go from like living for like 800-900 years to living like 40 and 50? Because the disease and if we had no technology back then, we have it all now. But mitochondrial DNA is the DNA that's responsible for aging. Repeated stress and harm to mitochondrial DNA actually brings about old age. It's also responsible for turning your food into fuel and the energy in your cells, right? So if you do exercise, you recharge your cells. If you sleep, you're not recharging your cells. When you sleep, you're healing. So people have this really confused idea about what sleep does. Sleep is when your body heals. It's not chilling out and recouping and recharging. Like, that happens when you exercise. So anybody says they've got no energy, they're going back to sleep, like, unless they're ill. And the only reason you go back to sleep when you're ill is because your body needs to conserve energy, and it needs to use that energy healing, right? It doesn't want you expending energy, waving your arms around while talking on camera. It wants you to kind of just stay in your fucking lane, and all of this energy that you have, we need. But the first thing you should do is get up and go for a walk. If you're unwell, you need to kind of like exercise, because you need to charge your cells, and then go to sleep, because then your body can use that energy to heal. So it's your mitochondrial DNA that actually turns your food into fuel and is responsible. I mean, we'll do lots of other stuff, but this is the bit that kind of caught my attention. You're responsible for old age. And so my first thought was, I wonder if that's why women live longer. You know, we potentially have more mitochondrial DNA because we pass it on, and it's passed on in mother's line. Potentially that's why we live longer, and that is a working theory. It's not just, I mean, I had the idea and found out, oh, actually this is something that they believe is true. But also, one of the things that has been so scientifically confusing, from a scientific standpoint, really confusing about the Rona, is the vast array of symptoms. Like, vast array of symptoms. So the way that an illness works is you I get allergy, right? I get hay fever. So when it's hay fever season, I have a pollen allergy, I have a runny nose, I have itchy eyes, I have a sore throat, I get tired, because your body goes into it goes into shock, right? It's tired because it's fighting off, like it's allergic to the air, right? It's just non-stop working. So it starts to get tired, you get exhausted. Sometimes my brain stops working because it's just so fucking tired. But, you know, next year the symptoms will be the same. So next year during pollen season, I'm not going to wake up in the morning and all of a sudden I need my leg amputated because I've contracted a flesh-eating virus. And then in 2024, I'm not going to wake up with myocarditis because of the pollen, right? Like, if I have hay fever, I have the same symptoms. And with the Rona, is people were having different symptoms. Like, some people were getting shingles and chickenpox. I mean, now people are getting like monkeypox from the vax, but there's this giant array of symptoms. And if you ever saw the 14-page Pfizer release document, which was just like filled with possible side effects from their vaccine, and all of those side effects mirrored things that people were experiencing from the Rona, right? Which is not how an illness works. So for ages I've been like, they're doing something else, and my initial thought, but thinking completely outside of the box with no idea whether this was possibly even possible, was that they must be doing something to bring about things that you were potentially going to experience later on in life and pulling it forward. That's kind of what I thought potentially could be happening. Again, I didn't know whether this was even physically possible. Well, on the discovery of understanding that mitochondrial DNA is responsible for aging, by targeting mitochondrial DNA with the Rona, is what you're doing is you're targeting the DNA that's responsible for aging. If you have a predisposition to a certain illness during your lifespan, maybe later on, by targeting your DNA that's responsible for aging, is you absolutely can pull that forward, right? And I say predisposition because it doesn't then mean it's going to transpire, right? So you can have a genetic predisposition to a illness. It doesn't necessarily have to come through, because you can alter your eating habits, you can move through the emotional trauma that is causing complications. So there's loads of different ways that you can actually alter your trajectory, so health complications that are potentially going to happen just never do. Like, this is why epigenetics is fantastic and really cool. But so then it started to open up the real possibilities that this is what's really going on. I mean, they are trying to destroy women, and they have been systematically destroying women for thousands of years. And now men are just women anyway, so you don't need them at all. But so when it comes back to the if you target the mitochondrial DNA, yes, you start pulling forward diseases that are potentially going to get later on in life. But also, because it's that DNA that's responsible for turning your food into fuel and energy, is if you target that, is you're then going to have more trouble turning food into fuel. And you're going to have less energy, so your immune system, even if it's functioning, isn't going to function as well anymore because it doesn't have the same amount of energy. So you've got depleted energy stores, depleted immune system. You're now experiencing all of the illnesses that could have come later on in life, like all in the one go. If you're struggling to turn food into fuel, chances are you're struggling to turn food into extract the nutrients and minerals that you need to feed your immune system and to do everything else. So you just basically, by targeting the mitochondrial DNAs, you're just like fucking with anybody's capacity to fight off anybody's capacity to fight off what they're ill with. So the counter to that if you focus on restoring, this is my theory, if you focus on restoring mitochondrial DNA, what you can then do is potentially reverse the effects, right? So I want you to think about, so this, the fact that 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds are all having heart attacks, right? That doesn't happen. Those are things that happen in your 40s and 50s, which is what kind of started sparking me, why is everything being pulled forward 20 years, 30 years, right? So if they're pulling it forward, there must be a way to kind of fix and restore your mitochondrial DNA, and there is, and you can. I mean, obviously there'd be stem cell therapy, but I don't trust any kind of therapy like that. But there are actual foods that you can eat, and oysters is one, walnuts is another one, and I love walnuts. One, because so I know walnuts are really good for mental well-being because they're really good for your brain, right? And the reason why I love walnuts is because they look like brains. So the universe made it really simple for us, to figure out what kind of things we need in order to help ourselves. There's a general rule of thumb: the colour or shape of an item, colour and or shape, it helps you identify how it's going to help you. So red stuff tends to be really good for your cardiovascular system. I mean, that's the easiest one. I think we've been through this before, food is medicine. I haven't got my book that I made in front of me. But yeah, so walnuts, oysters, there's quite a few different things that you can do to increase your repair your mitochondrial DNA. So if you know anybody who is struggling with long Rona or is vaxxed to the hilt, have a Google of, and that's all I did was I didn't use Google obviously, but hopefully you understand what I mean. Just foods for mitochondrial DNA. I did have 9 foods for mitochondrial DNA open, but I think I just shut lots of my tabs. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Blood. So women have more DNA than men as well, which was really kind of interesting. So the X chromosome actually has more DNA than the Y chromosome, and so when women have got 2 X's, so therefore they have more. However, we have supposedly we don't use it, and it's just kind of like smushed and ignored, right? But I'm under the impression that we don't use it because we've been like shoved in boxes and not allowed to think, or not allowed to kind of be part of society for thousands of years. Like you were just a cow. That's it. A slave and a cow. That's what women have been. So potentially it's not used because it's been like not harnessed, rather than it's unessential. So my little musing was I'm going to read it word for word. Are we, as the creators, more powerful at manipulating time-space through our vocalizations? As in, we're the ones who give birth and are therefore naturally more powerful to birthing ideas into reality. So, I mean, that was me kind of like talking at 4:30 in the morning. But if you look at like ancient understandings and ancient scriptures talking about creation, and talking about energy, so we have you know, yin yang. There's always opposites, feminine and masculine, left and right, past and future. All of those things are always in balance. Logic and creation. So all of the things that are the feminine energy is creation, is future, is all of the things to do with enhancing and bringing about big shifts and changes in reality, right? So you know, the guy has the idea and the girl goes and paints and creates and makes it happen, right? So that's when you look at things from an ancient historical perspective, and you look at the religious perspective of the interplay between the different energies, and pull all of that together. That's why men and women work really well together as a unit. So my kind of what ifs was, well, what if the part of the DNA that is kind of pushed, is like pushed down, is a part that's going to be really fucking helpful with regards to what's going on now. So we all create our own reality, and that's you know, quantum physics. That's not just woo-woo bullshit. That's quite literally quantum physics states that and we've got the placebo effect and the nocebo effect. What you believe is true. You create it. Just is, right? For anybody who's kind of new to me and this, like that, you've got to catch up with that, right? Just is. So following on from that, what if, you know, so if you go to God said let there be light, and there was light, right? Just decided light, okay? That's the creation energy. And if we are all little divine sparks, so we're all part of that divine energy, in us we have the power to be like, oh, light, then there's light, but just potentially impacting a smaller sphere, right? So I will impact my teeny tiny little world while everybody else is impacting their own little worlds. Like I don't impact everybody's. However, if we all are able to come together and all have focused energy and focused intention about one thing, you can quite literally change what's going on in other people's worlds. And they did that with the monk effect. They quite literally altered the crime rates in New York in the 70s by just fucking meditating and sending out Care Bear beams of love and doing nothing else. So again, that's already a proven fact, that we can manipulate energy. So is it that women are more powerful at that because of the mitochondrial creation based DNA, mitochondrial DNA that turns food into fuel? So fuel is energy. Like, is this what, like, And again, this is all just like kind of, this is the crazy places my brain goes while I'm supposed to be doing other work. Yes, told we can't do our gifts, and not shown how. So if you think about the information that is suppressed and the way the information is suppressed, right? If you go back to history, witches, King James's fucking Bible on witches, right? It was the women witches who would be the ones who were around the cauldron, who were doing the spells and spelling things, right? They were the power base of the magic and energy, right? And if men were better at it, then men would have been doing it. Like this was all still happening when men were in charge. Therefore, the women must be better at it for some reason, on some level. Then obviously King the witches in Scotland, while he was on a boat on the way to see who was about to be his wife, they called a storm and almost killed him. So when he returned to Scotland, he went on his kind of witch rampage and rewrote the Bible, removing magic and witchcraft and manifestation and all of those things. So if any of you who's watching this is a Christian, like that was all in your Bible, and it's not, because the guy who wrote it is the same guy who's responsible for, over here in the UK, like burning shitloads of people at the stake for witchcraft, right? So he's the one who outlawed it all. He didn't like them. But it's women who were doing the spelling and are the natural creators, life creators, because you're the ones giving birth, right? So that's DNA. And so even now they're trying to destroy and remove women, like, first. Yes, they're trying to turn men pathetic. So no longer the protectors, but actually you're still allowed to be part of society. Whereas what's going on in the UK at the moment is they're trying to make people who are pregnant unable to work. Women, because you have a period, like, oh, you can't work because it's a disease. Like, it is a disability. Scotland's is now giving free tampons and sanitary pads out on prescription. You have a prescription for an illness. So Scotland have just made being a woman an illness that needs a prescription for. They've just made all the women diseased. So they are trying to put women back in boxes, and they're unable to work, and like you can't assemble, you can't use the internet, you can't talk, you can't have a conversation, you're not allowed to do anything. Yeah. Okay, so blood. So I was actually kind of... So the other thing, right, so is we've got all of these blood disorders with the Rona. So why the blood? Well, the blood's the thing that carries your oxygen around your body. It's the thing, you got white blood cells and red blood cells, and your white blood cells are your kind of healing blood cells. Your red blood cells are kind of the ones that are, whizzing around and, keeping your heart going. I mean, they're pretty vital for your survival, right? But if you remember a while back, anybody with an A blood type is more susceptible to the Rona. And I've never quite figured, I've watched lots of the blood stuff, and it's never really never really had the light bulb with regards to, but why would somebody with an A be more susceptible? Well, the thing that I found the other day was that your blood group, so your blood type determines you have a different pH level depending on your blood type. So B blood is acidic, A is alkaline and O is like super alkaline. No, it didn't have Reese RH type on this thing that I was reading, so I don't know what the RH one is. But there's cases of where people have had A blood types and they've had an infection and they've lost all of the A antigens on their blood, and so then their blood has turned into O. So they become a universal O donor. So you can change your blood type. There's also bone marrow transplants where people have taken on the blood type. So, and again, when you're kind of looking into these things, they don't put like they went from this to this, but I would hazard a guess it's people going from A to O, right? I don't because then when you go from A to O is you're losing the A antigens and you're going from alkaline to further alkaline. You're not going from acidic to alkaline or alkaline to acidic. Like I mean that is a complete like switcheroo of your body type. So this is really important because the key times where blood type's been switched is when people have had liver transplants. So there are bone marrow, but also liver transplants, and a lot of the Rona and the Ronavax target the liver. So within 8, I think that study was saying within 8 hours is your liver is just riddled with S protein. So why go to the liver specifically? The liver is heavily involved in the mitochondrial DNA and regeneration. Is it mitochondrial DNA? Or have I got that mixed up? I can't remember. But the liver is really important with regards to let me check my notes. Oh, that's me talking about blue bloods. Yeah, so if you alter the liver, you can change the blood type. The vaccines target the liver. Yeah. And I can't remember about the liver and aging. I mean, I know that, you know, obviously if you damage your liver a lot, it will regenerate. Your livers are fucking awesome. You get liver cirrhosis if you drink lots of alcohol. I think if you go down to like 25%, it comes back. So Tor did a lot about the liver, talks a lot about the liver, and that's the organ that was being eaten by crows every single day in that Greek myth. And he just like came back, like the next day it was eaten again. Prometheus and the fire. Is it Prometheus? I can't remember. So the liver's important as well. But basically, so they're targeting A. It was A types who were more susceptible. Is you can change your blood type. So what if with the Rona they're targeting the mitochondrial DNA and targeting the liver, so that they are just putting in motion altering somebody's blood type, right? So when you have an infusion of the wrong blood type, your body starts to reject it because I don't quite. These are all kind of like this is still like in a very theoretical space. So if you have thoughts and ideas on this or want to do digging on this, like nobody's kind of like bringing this blood stuff up. Yeah, but I think this is the blood's the key, right? Yeah. So. And here was the last bit. Yeah, temperature. Okay, so food. No, just to dispel a couple of myths. So food, what you eat can't alter your blood pH, and you wouldn't want it to, because we'd all die from eating the wrong food. So you can alter like your urine pH from the food that you eat, but actually temperature will alter your blood pH, because I mean, if you think about it, so a lot of your blood cells are water. A lot of you as a person is water. Water, when it changes temperature, it changes, like, it's ice, then water, then steam, and then vapor and steam. But so water is susceptible to change through temperature-based influence. What they're trying to do right now is terraform the Earth, or the Earth is terraforming, and I think they're trying to terraform it backwards to stop it happening. I think they're trying to counter terraform, right? And so they're trying to roll it back. So why do they want it to go cooler? Is that how they are altering and targeting our blood? But also with regards to, it depends what kind of rabbit hole you want to fall down. The royal lines always used to be called blue bloods, and there is like old scriptures that like call them blue bloods because they have blue blood, which kind of leads in and feeds into the different ruling race, aliens, Nephilim, all of that kind of shit. So are they trying to weed out and hunt for their own line as much as possible? Because they, if you think about the Queen, like, and haemophilia was kind of like running down the royal line. They were all inbreeding so much that they've all got like webbed toes. I mean, I don't know what they have, but that's kind of like the in-joke, isn't it? Webbed toes and 6 fingers, which is, real thing that happens from inbreeding. So whether they need to find pure bloods, kill others off. I mean, they want us all dead, right? So it's just, they're going to kill us all in whatever way, and whatever way works, makes them happy. But then you have to think about, what about the people who they're not killing in that fashion? Why are some people dying in that way and some aren't? So what, if people die, if all the A-type die, and if you can turn A-type into O's, and all the O's die, then it's the B's who are left, right, with the acidic blood. I mean, that doesn't sound human, and I've said this before. How can we all be the same if we have different blood? That doesn't make sense. And it makes even less sense now that some blood is acidic and some blood is not acidic. Some blood's alkaline. Like, you don't just, like, how did somebody's blood be acidic and somebody's blood be, like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And there may be a really simple biological explanation, but because I'm not a biologist or that kind of scientist, I just don't know. But it just doesn't make sense to me. Excuse me, guys. Yeah, winter's coming. They like it chilly. So they are trying to pull it back, and they're trying to cool the earth, right? They're trying to cool the earth. So the earth is warming, and it is warming, but at a kind of the pace that it needs to warm at. But because it is terraforming, because it is going from 3D to 4D, all of that shit is just happening. And they're trying to roll it back because they want their slave race. So why the bees, potentially? Maybe that's it. It's the bee for the blue blood. Maybe that's why they called him bee antigen. Because it's the blue blood antigen. It's the acidic one. Like, what works better in the cold? Acid or alkaline? I don't know. These are all questions. These are just questions. So this is kind of like the journey my brain's going on right now. So other bit. Okay, let's quickly do the 66 Jews. Okay, 66 million Jews. Right, this is a really little aside. So I want to say thank you very much to Margaret for sending this. Oh, acid works better in the cold. Interesting. Oh, I know, Margaret. Yeah, Penelope had a black screen earlier. I think it works on my Facebook profile fine. I think Twitter seems to be going okay. I'm just about to thank you, Margaret. So I want to say thanks to Margaret for this little video, which is called it's titled 6 Million Jews. Well, it's not titled anything, but Margaret titled it 6 Million Jews. And I'd put it on the side as a thing that, I'll add it to my list. I'll add it to my list. And actually, I then went to make myself a cup of coffee, and I pressed play while I was making a cup of coffee, and I'm really grateful for that. But it kind of means that I'm still talking at midnight. So thanks. But this is a little aside, and then we will get on to 5G. It's my pleasure, iPal. So this is, okay. So basically, this is a 20-minute video of a guy who's tried to trace back when people first started talking about 6 million Jews who were killed by the Nazis, right? Because this is just a random number that somebody came up with. And there was always this conflict between older people, like never being taught that number, and then all of a sudden everybody gets taught that number. You know, when all of a sudden everybody's saying the exact same thing, but nobody can figure out where it came from, it's part of a psyop, right? And so I've always been kind of on the fence about the number, because I'd heard there were only 10 million total before that point, and to murder 6 million, but then there's still to be like a lot, like but maths has never been my strong point. So I was just like, well, you know, I mean, nobody's going to be exact, and but actually this video is really interesting because he kind of starts to go back, but when did they first start talking about it? Now he does get confused, and I think a lot of people do get confused a little bit. So he found, and he's got the old newspapers, right? So he found the first kind of mentioning about 6 million Jews when they're talking about 6 million Jews in Russia in 1915, right? Which is way before World War II. But actually, I did one better than him. No, I didn't. I went to the Library of Congress, so I don't have the actual physical newspaper. This guy had the actual physical newspapers. But I found them talking about 6 million Jews in Russia in 1877 in a newspaper. And you can go find it like on that link, right? They're all there. On the Library of Congress. And so they start talking about so these 6 million Jews under threat in Russia, they're going to be genocided, and they're talking about this for a very long time before it happens. Like, speaking that shit into reality, if you want to talk about speaking any kind of stuff into it. For 50 years, they were salting. So salting is a kind of a term, like a sales and marketing term. So if I want you to buy something, like if I'm doing like one of those like landing pages where you're reading about my stuff and I say like get my free thing, I will probably be talking about my paid for thing on that free thing, so that when I try and sell you that thing on the next page, it's not a culture shock, it's not a surprise, right? Then so they were talking about it for a really long time before Jews started getting murdered, and because they were talking about it for a really long time, the eugenics movement was in full swing, and there was lots of different, I mean particularly in California, was trying to figure out how to get rid of the Jewish population because they didn't like them. So anti-Semitism was pretty rife, right? And I remember being a kid and being like, why does everybody always hate the Jews? And why were they never allowed to live anywhere? And, and you think for like over 2,000 years, they've been targeted because they killed one person. I mean, that's a fucking grudge. Throwing that out there, Christians. That's a grudge and a half. Right? It's a bit of a grudge. So I always been like, well, that's just a bit harsh, right? But so 1877, they started talking about this 6 million Jews number. So then, because I was watching the video, while he was kind of mentioning the headlines, I was jumping onto Library of Congress to see if I could kind of find the articles. And then I found another really interesting article which shows, I mean there were some things that it wouldn't let me see. Let me see if I can get this open. Which shows what the Red Cross is saying about the numbers of deaths. I mean, yeah, exactly. Jesus was a Jew in the first place. I mean, he wanted to be like an amazing rabbi, which is why he like read the Torah inside and out, figured out that it had been muddled with, put it back in the right order, and taught it in the right order, and therefore, this is how you wield the magic of the universe while on earth, and this is how you can turn water into wine. Yeah, he was Jewish. Where am I? This one first. Oh no. Okay. So what you can see is this is the Red Cross actual counts for all deaths in German prisons. So this is German prisons, right? Just the prisons. So they was 300,000, just under. Now they did also shoot people, like lots of people were like shot. They didn't do it for very long because the people who were shooting them were getting PTSD. They did also euthanize lots of people in hospitals. They did also starve people. So they did do lots of different ways. So this isn't, so this person makes a incorrect assumption that this number then means all of them, right? And this is what I see quite a lot. We find one bit of evidence, we're like, oh right, well therefore they only killed that many. Well no, that does say just in prisons, but it's still not like you'd expect it to be like 4 million, right? So then, where we really want to be going for information on what happened in Nazi Germany is the Nuremberg trials, which are available on the internet. And actually, while the Nuremberg trials was a fucking sham show trial, biggest pile of bullshit, so they actually also did submit evidence, right? So some of the stuff in there is pretty interesting. And what I found is that, let me just, so I've got the two links. If I give you this link on my Telegram, then you can go get them. Okay. So then you can get the two, so there's two different Nuremberg transcripts. Oh, for fuck's sake, Kate. I'm pressing the wrong button. Sorry guys, because I'm confusing myself. So there's two different Nuremberg transcripts, and there's the kind of the closing argument for the, we're talking about all the murders. You know, it's saying like we managed to kill, we were liquidating 500 a day over here, you know, we were shooting 90 to 100 people over here, and you haven't really got like, we did this for 12 days and then the entire village was dead, right? We haven't got those kind of contexts. But there is a memo where a memo has been sent congratulating Kiev for murdering 30,000 Jews in 2 days. Right, so it is possible. Like, in order to kill 6 million people over the space of a year, because I just did 6 million divided by 365, you have to kill 16,500 people a day. So it is doable. Right? It is actually quite doable if you have the infrastructure in place. And so they were able to kill 30,000 people in 2 days because they did it in Kiev. So bearing in mind all of the salting for the 6 million Jews was talking about Russia. Well, Ukraine was part of Russia, was part of the USSR, the Soviet Union, but actually the Ukraine was like, they went all in on like Hitler, and that's why they're still like freaking Nazis in the Ukraine now. But so they did manage that, and so from all of the stuff that I've read and seen and watched about World War II, and obviously some of it's bullshit, but you know, for the first few years, is they weren't just killing everybody. They weren't. They were using them. They were working people to death, and they were pretending that everything was fine. They only really started killing people en masse in the last couple of years. And so then, you know, if you can kill 16,500 people a day in 12 months, is you can kill 6 million people. But even in the like places like Auschwitz and Birkenau and the other death camps, is they weren't death camps. And Treblinka, like Auschwitz was the only one that was kind of created as a death camp. The others was like a work camp or and an experimentation camp, and they all kind of had their own little jobs. But the ovens and that was kind of Auschwitz, and then they were going to replicate what was going on at Auschwitz in other places, but they never got that far. So if you look at the extermination and assume all the camps was the same as Auschwitz, and they were doing that across Germany, then of course you're going to believe it was easy to kill 6 million people in the space of like a few years. But that's not the reality of what was going on the ground. So I don't know. I'm just saying I don't know. I question the number because the Germans were using the Jews to build the railways, to, like, you don't, they only started, and they only actually really started having like really slaughtering everybody, even in Auschwitz, was once the Allies had kind of got on to invaded and they were coming, and they were only doing it to kind of make sure that there was nobody left to tell a tale. So rather than looking at it from, you know, well, you know, 6 million is the potential site because they were talking all the way from 1877, and we've got the conflicting accounts from the Red Cross. Well, actually, even Nazi doctors and survivors, you know, people who, you know, I've got that book, The Nazi Doctors. Is it under there? I don't know. Even in that, you know, the evidence is they weren't just, like, they were taking people's houses and they were kicking them out for ages and moving them to other places, and they actually had so the Nazis had a plan for the Jews. They didn't want them in Germany because they, you know, believed it was their fault. All of the shit happened was their fault. That was kind of the psyop, right? And so they came up with a plan to just get them out of Germany. We're just going to move you. And they tried to do this humane plan of kicking them out and wanting other countries to take responsibility for them. So here's the other thing, is like loads of Jews left. So if there were only 6 million Jews in that area, loads left. So if a few 100,000 leave, then there's not 6 million left. So how did they kill 6 million? Like, were all 10 million like there? I just, anyway. But they wanted them. They just wanted them gone, and then because no other country would take them, then they came up with the final solution. But this is like 41 came up with the idea, then they started like kind of doing it on the down low, then they started, and so when, you know, they were killing lots of people, not just Jewish people, so they were killing the old, the infirm, they were killing blacks, gays, so they weren't just killing Jews. So when you've got like 60 or 80 people dead in a day, like they could have just been 60 gay people and not Jewish people. So there isn't necessarily always that context. I mean, the Kiev killing 30,000 Jews in 48 hours, that was kind of like the memo, that was contextual. But so they could have, like, you know, they shot an entire village because they just got pissed off with the village because they wouldn't do as they said. They aren't all automatically Jewish people, so you can't assume all of the murders in the transcripts are all Jewish people either. So it's just for a country that prided itself on its record keeping, right? Which is how Nazi Germany was, why the reason they were so successful at what they were doing was because of the record keeping. So you're telling me there was those excruciating records and we can't give an exact number on how many people were murdered? Like, it shouldn't be a roundup, right? It should be an exact number of deaths. Like, this is the exact number of people who were murdered, or this is the exact number of recorded murders because we have all of the memos We've got all of this information. Like, this is the recorded numbers of deaths. So even if it's just this is the recorded numbers of deaths, we think it's probably a little bit higher, and the vast majority are Jewish. Oh, interesting. But yeah, just it's a weird one. But it did send me down a little bit of a mini rabbit hole there. I thought I'd share it with you guys. So I don't know whether what I will say before we move on is I do believe lots of people were murdered. I do believe that the Nazis were fucking insane. I do believe that Auschwitz was real. Like, I've seen and watched too many of the cruddy black and white recordings, and in honesty read a lot of the I read the transcripts, not necessarily just the Nuremberg trial transcripts. There was a labour camp in Germany, right? There was a labour camp in Jersey, sorry. There was a Nazi labour camp in Jersey, and you can access the records from that, which had SS soldiers who were working people to death, experimenting on people and doing disgusting shit to people in Jersey. And I know that's a fact, not just from these records, but when I was shocked and I was like, Mum, did you know? And she was like, yeah, we were taught that in school. So my mum was taught it in school because, you know, she's older than me, and it was, you know, her mum will have known it because her mum was fighting in the war in a Sheffield steel mill, you know, run across doing steel girders and making shells and stuff. So she knew, Mum was taught, and then I wasn't. So then the records resurfaced. So I do despair with people who believe that there was, like, it just didn't happen. Like it did happen, potentially not to the same scale. Like we need to look at the Nazi Germany stuff the same way we look at Rona, right? Something did happen, not to the scale of what they were saying in the media, but something did happen. Yeah, they did burn a lot of stuff. So it would be very difficult to kind of get a real figures and numbers. But they should be able to, I mean, even if somebody just went through the 140 pages of this death, this, like that they literally have the record for, and like gave us all a number, like yeah. And also, Eva Kor, God rest her soul, is still one of my heroes. Right, she, and if you don't know her story, if you've ever seen any kind of photos of Auschwitz, and the striped pajama photo, which is like huge and everywhere, and there's the two little girl twins at the front, like Eva and Margaret Kor at the front, you know, and she campaigned for years to find out what was done because of Mengele. And then we have to remember that they took the germ. So okay, so the real reason the government's covered all that shit up, right? The real reason, let's be honest, is not because it didn't happen. The real reason we don't know the numbers, the real reason we don't know who did what, is because our governments all came in at the end of it, and they took all of the fucking scientists and doctors, they gave them all new names, and they put them in our governments, they put them in our schools, and they put them in our universities, and they put them in NASA, and then they put them in Canada, and they did the MK Ultra. They continued the Nazi experiments in the United Kingdom, in the USA, in Canada, and across the Commonwealth. So that's the real reason we don't actually know what was going on in World War II. It's not because it didn't happen, it's because they're covering up the fact that they took all of that information and they went, these are really interesting and exciting experiments, I wonder whether we can replicate them. Which is what they fucking did. They're also not going to tell you the reason why the real psychology and the real science was all done in, like, you know, pre-1945, 1950, is because it's all the fucking sicko Nazi experiments. Like, you want to predict human behaviour? You had fucking, that's where they were doing it all. Anything after the 70s is just fake science, because I'm grateful that we have ethics nowadays, but you can't override something that happened when they pushed people to the brink compared to what they're doing now when they're not allowed to do it, right? You just can't. You can't say, well, I want you to imagine that you're sat in a room and we're torturing you. How would you react? And then create a theory based on that. Okay? You actually want to use the real science where they stuck them in a room and they tortured them and they were like, oh, you know, 27 people. Oh, 2 days later they all committed suicide. So if we torture somebody, they're going to commit, like, that's the real science. I don't believe we need to go back there. We 100% don't. Really don't. But anything after then is just, it's fake science, because you can't do it and you should not do it. It is still going on now, exactly. But that's why. That's the real reason we don't fucking know. And I say we, as in our governments will know exact numbers. They will know. So you go, why aren't they telling us? Well, they aren't telling us because they're covering their own backs. Because they're wankers. Okay. And after that rant's over, we're going to quickly talk about 5G. Okay, so this is my last rant before we go to sleep. I go to sleep. Let me just open it up. Okay, let me go to these. Start here. Oh, I surely found it on. Children don't just disappear. No, they don't. Oh, and yeah, exactly. They're still experimenting now. They're still doing all this shit now. So if you think about Fauci and that experiment where they had the beagles in the box, and they had like flesh eating, and they were just like eaten to death, right? So they do it on animals and then they do human trials. So they do it on orphans. Yeah. We live in such a fucked up world. Such a fucked up world. No, I'm showing you the wrong button. There we go. Okay, so 5G. Now I've talking about. I think I've spoken about well. So I haven't spoken about 5G as 5G. Okay, so we've spoken about microwave radiation. We've spoken about all of the experiments in the 40s and 50s that they were doing with microwave radiation. You know, that kind of goes, you know, and HAARP and all of those other things, because my personal opinion is that if you want to get a government body or a local council or somebody to take you seriously on something which is seen as a conspiracy, which makes you seem crazy, is you can't go outside the box in your information, right? The only way you can convince somebody else that it's true is you have to try and find government-based documents that say that, right? And you shouldn't have to, right? You shouldn't have to, because some scientists are reliable, but some scientists are paid and they're fucking crazy, right? So you can't say trust this scientist, but we don't trust this scientist because, right? So unfortunately, when it comes to research, you can't trust any scientists. If you don't know them and you're not them, you can't, right? Because they all have an agenda. They will all be paid, right? So whether they are working for a university, whether they're writing a book, whether they are paid by the telephone companies, they will all have an agenda. And if you want to be a published scientist, you will toe the line. And we also know the only way to control the narrative is by controlling the narrative. So that also means there will be people who are propped up as good people and they're not, right? So this is why I keep trying to show you how to check research. You know, go straight to the biases, go and cyber stalk this person a little bit to see who they are, what are they really saying, did they just randomly appear, what other methods did they use the right methods, did they apply it, you know, were they but they had it in a Faraday bag, so of course it's not going to pick anything up. Like sometimes they put all this shit there as well, right? Yes, there is the link between 5G and the Rona, but a correlational link, right? So this is key. So this is key that we need to get in early. The cabal, I will not call them elite, right, because they're just disgusting. The cabal have been doing multiple things in multiple different ways to cause us harm over an extended period, and ramped up that extended period of harm in the 50s and 60s. So we have food that is bad, we have the shit that they spray down on us in the chemtrails, which is in our water, and all of our water's poisoned. We have vaccines that are killing us, we have EMF radiation that's killing us, we have just all of the things are all happening at the same time. So we have to be careful about kind of falling into any one kind of box stroke hole and believing that's the it, right? None of those are the undisputed only reason, because otherwise, much like when I was talking about me having hay fever, is everybody would present the same, and people aren't presenting the same, which means it's got to be everything at once, causing conflict and issues. So in the UK, you know, I tend to be pretty so safe from, it's funny, safe from radiation, because I live in an old brick house. If you live in a concrete building, you are safer to radiation, external radiation, right? I laugh because I have a telegraph pole like in our driveway, so quite literally in the driveway, but it's an old house, so it's brick, so like my Wi-Fi doesn't even travel upstairs, so everything's like plugged in wires, but I mean obviously these are still emitting stuff, right? But silly experiments like the shot in the Big Bang, I don't know, possibly. It might be a delay, so I can't remember what I said about them. So yes, there is a link. Yes, absolutely. There are the links with Spanish flu and radio. There's all of these. Like, so we are energetic beings. If you alter the, like, you can use music. So the Rife machine uses frequency to heal. They now use intensive frequency lasers to literally just like obliterate cancer, right? So we know frequency can alter us. We know it messes with water. We know that we're majority water. If you were going to fire like a frequency laser at somebody at their bloodstream, it's going to do something funny to their bloodstream because it's going to do something to the water. So yes, we've got all these correlations, but in order for us to do so, the thing that's been the only investigation that I've done into kind of frequencies is based around understanding the implications with regards to brainwashing and mind control. One, because I needed to kind of figure out what they were doing. I understand what you mean. Science experiments being done now on the Big Bang and stuff like that. Yeah, fake science. Yeah, we get fake science where they getting paid for it. Is that what you mean? Because the 5G stuff, I have personally found, has been very it's been very sensationalized. I'll get there in the end, Margaret. Very sensationalized, very cultish, the same as people have been about the Rona, the same as, and I've never really dedicated the time to it, right? Because every time I've seen people talking about 5G and they're campaigning about 5G, it's just bullshit surface level campaigning, right? There's just kind of like the annoying pathetic stuff that you know is never going to go anywhere. And then after kind of doing my little mini investigation today, I got really angry because there is the information out there and the tools out there that it took me less than an hour to find this stuff, that had somebody kind of done it properly and gifted it to us, we could have stopped a lot of this shit, right? So this is what it comes back to, right? The people who are supposedly awake wake up and then just blindly follow somebody else, and then they go from opposition to controlled opposition and stay in that box. And so this is why I always try and give you, I give you enough information, I hopefully give you enough information about me that you can understand my biases, right? I have a bias. The main one is I want us all to survive. I don't agree with boxes. And there's only two sides in this war, the people and the cabal, right? There's no other sides in that, right? But that's my bias, right? You may not be along for that ride, and that's okay. As long as you know what your biases are. So I tried to give you enough information about me that you will be able to be sat there and be like, okay, well actually that makes sense for her. I don't agree with that. That's cool. But I also try to make sure that no matter what, I give you the links to the stuff that I found. I share why I feel the way that I feel, but what I know. But it's up to you to make your own decision, right? So I'm not just going to tell you stuff and then kind of force you to believe it. Like, it's up to you, right? It's up to you. This is what I believe, this is what I'm going to do. But also, hopefully, allow you to kind of see where my brain goes when it goes, like the blood stuff, and the we were just talking about, you know, alkaline and acid blood. Like, nobody else is talking about that. Like, I don't know whether that's true or not. That's just what my brain's kind of putting together at the moment. This is kind of a learning as we go process. But all of the 5G stuff that I've seen has been very sensationalised. There's been loads of bullshit in it, and no real information that you can take to a council and say right? But all the information's out there. So I want to start with the thing that I was attempting to watch in the background, but I've been unable to even finish it, because when I watch a documentary, when I watch something, I will pay attention, and when they will feature a person, I will go and find out about that person, see what they've written, all of those other things. And I'm very grateful to the Epoch Times for doing this, because it enabled me to find Barry Towers properly, because I've struggled to find him last time I looked, and find out that he's ex-MO5 and his background is British Navy intelligence, and he used to work on a microwave warfare projects in the 1950s, 60s, which is why he's an authority. So if you're going to present evidence from him, he's a whistleblower, he's an authority. Like, he literally worked on microwave weapons for the British government in the 50s and 60s, when he's saying at 17.5 hertz you go into a zombie state. He knows, because he was fucking testing it, right? Probably very unethically, because it was before we had morals, right? So he's recompensing now by whistleblowing, right? So he was deep state, he was working for the deep state, he was part of the deep state. Well, he isn't now, he's trying to tell everybody, right? So that's why he's an authority. He's got a legitimate reason for knowing what he knows. There's a hell of a lot of people who don't have a legitimate reason. They appear overnight and they just have this random information. And as soon as they have as soon as there's one piece of information which is incorrect or just bullshit, you have to discount everything that they've said, right? Because what the governments will do is they will pull on that teeny tiny bit that's bullshit, and they will destroy the entire rest of your argument, because that teeny tiny bit was bullshit. So they focus on that teeny tiny bit, and therefore the rest of your argument must be shit, right? And they did this to... It showed how good they do this. And the whole paedophiles in Parliament stuff, Carl Beach, they were legitimate. So thousands of legitimate victims of lords, ladies, members of Parliament, and there was real work being done to investigate all of this stuff. This is a while ago. And all of a sudden, overnight, this guy called Carl Beach, who is a victim, appeared on the scene, and he was propped up by the media, and everybody went and spoke to him, and he was like the star witness. And then they found out that he'd been abusing little boys, right? So because he'd been abusing little boys as well, I mean, they honed in on that teeny tiny little thing, discounted the fact that he probably had been also abused, and the entire case against the lords and ladies and all of these things disintegrated because he had photos on his computer, like tens of thousands of photos on his computer, and he'd been fiddling, right? So it completely undermined everything else because of that one teeny tiny little thing. I mean, it shouldn't have, right? That should make no difference. I mean, just because you are an abuser, it doesn't mean that you weren't abused. But that's an aside. Okay, so this is why I've kind of stayed out of the 5G stuff, because I found the stuff from Barry Trowers 2 years ago, went and saw all the dodgy patents, took the information I needed with regards to mind control, and I was just like, I'm just going to see what's going on with 5G stuff. However, Epoch Times did this video. They released it only maybe a few days ago. Also, the other thing is, like, if people are foreign, they're doing it in their language, so I can't listen in the background. I know I have to watch it, so I've still got bits left. If you want to watch it, you do need to be a member because it's premium content, but also you need a VPN, and you need to kind of make sure you're showing that you're in the USA, because it's only allowed to be shown in the USA. However, it is available to be seen on YouTube. So I don't have the link. Shirley got the link, and I shared it. I thought I'd shared it in Telegram. Okay, so that's the first thing. Is we had. Can I just swap these and you see them? Yeah, okay. So then we have, I found, so Barry was knocking around on the 3rd of February 2020. So this is while the Rona's going on, right? So I know I haven't watched this yet, but I think it probably will be well worth a watch. So I came across Barry when I was hunting for stuff on brainwashing and was investigating brainwashing and frequencies. He wrote a confidential report to the Police Federation in the United Kingdom about the Tetra project, which is the Tetra radio system that was going to be introduced into the UK in the early 2000s. Oh, I've got red and orange signal now I'm talking about this. I hope you can still hear me properly. In the early 2000s, and he was saying he literally and then he did the rounds on Channel 4 saying how dangerous it was. So since 2000, and still now it's the same system we have in place now, is they can run a tone through all the police equipment. So this is, personal radios, car radios, stuff that they have in the offices. It has the capacity in it to just run the tone through it and turn them all into zombies and just do what they say. So if you've ever watched any of those, protest videos, the Rona protest videos, where the police are just fucking insane and they look crazy, that's potentially, right? Just turn the tone. So that's how I came across him in the first instance. So he linked to this, in that video, he links to this website, and in here there is all the evidence anybody needs to get it stopped in their local area. Like actual proper evidence, including government-based documents. Like I've got CIA declassed stuff, right? But that's not English stuff. So the issue's always been, I was like, oh, I don't have the English stuff, right? Well, this is all the English stuff as well. So this is like, tells you which acts and laws they're supposed to fall under. So here's how you can quite literally go to your council tomorrow. This is in the United Kingdom, and you can serve them. Just write a letter to say you've got 14 days. Give them 14 days to sort this shit out. That you are concerned that they are in breach of the amendment of the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990, which states every application for planning permission for communication installations and associated apparatus shall be approved only after consideration of the precautionary principle is as it relates to communication installations and associated apparatus, right? This bit here. But what it's actually saying is they have to tell you what the harm is, what harm is going to come to people from the installation of that. That's in here. There we go. Every application for development consent shall be accompanied by statements setting out the effects, if any, on the health of the human population and that of domestic animals and wildlife. So they've got to have the health statement. This is in English law, British law. They have to have this health statement. So the smoking gun came because, oh no, that's New World Order stuff. No. Darn it. Let me see if I can find that. Sorry guys, 1 sec. The 19... Where's it gone? 1915 Act. Here we go. Resolution. Oh yeah, I'm not sure that it's still there. Oh, it's in Spanish as well. Let me just translate it before I show you guys. I don't think it's worked properly. Come on. I have saved it in English and saved this to the Wayback Machine. Okay. So we in the United Kingdom are part of the European Convention, which is, so we're no longer part of the EU, but that's separate to the Council, which is 46 member states. So the Council of Europe also includes Russia, right? So this is separate to the European Union, which was a political affiliation. This is kind of just a group of countries who all kind of like agreed to get along with each other and to have a shared looking after each other. Can I zoom in? So this is like, we've signed up to this. We've signed up to this. And if anybody says that they don't believe it, right, so the first thing you do is you say, I would like to make you aware that as a member state of the Council of Europe, and we are an active member of the organisation, right? As an active member of the Council of Europe, this resolution passed on May the 27th, 2011, with regards to the potential dangers of electromagnetic fields and their effects on the environment. That states, I'm going to whiz down, there should be, here we go, Rule 8, suggestion 821, to establish preventative thresholds for long-term exposure levels to microwaves in all indoor areas in accordance with the precautionary principle, so not exceeding 0.6 volts per meter, and to reduce it to 0.2 volts per meter. So this includes mobile phones, cordless phones, Wi-Fi, LAN, WiMAX computers and other wireless devices. They also need to raise awareness campaigns on the risks of potentially harmful long-term biological effects on the environment and human health, especially aimed at children, adolescents and young people of reproductive age. Right, so this is law. This is a law that was passed that we signed up to. We signed up to this resolution. And so they kind of, the Town and Planning Act says that they need to kind of put this in there. They haven't been putting masts up and telling people it's going to make you infertile, it's going to give your child cancer and all of those other things, but they're not doing that. And if they say we don't have the capacity, like, you can preempt this, because this is what they'll say, is, oh, well, we told people, we stuck a sign on the post, right, we stuck a sign up. Considering that all of our councils have spent 2 years painting signs on the fucking floors, sticking signs up everywhere telling everybody to be 2 meters distance, bombarding everybody's email box, spending shitloads of money on advertising about the Rona, which is a public health campaign. They set precedents with the Rona, with a public health campaign which proves they can tell everybody. Why haven't they done it with this, right? So they failed in their duties. They've shown that they can, they haven't. They're breaking the law, right? This is how you don't just go, well, you know, this scientist says it's this dangerous, like, who gives a shit? Like, they don't care. But you walk in and you be like, law, 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 you're breaking it, you've got 14 days to rectify it, otherwise I will be going to the police and I will be reporting you for misconduct in a public office. And this is just the beginning of the evidence. Do you want me to keep fucking digging into all the other shit that you're doing, right? I mean, this resolution I didn't find on that other page. Like this, I found this resolution first and then I found this other stuff. But these things together, and this so you find this document from this YouTube video, it's in there. And then the information for these 2 links, the Council of Europe and the government webpage, is here. And so for everybody, so for the 46 member states, right, 46 members of the Council of Europe, like, this is the entirety of Europe can get rid of 5G overnight if we just did this. And this has been in place for like a decade. A decade this has been in place, right? So there's another video here called 5G, but whatever you want to kind of like raise awareness. But this Environmental Health Trust, these are quite cool people. And they've got stuff for the USA. So this UCLA map, right? So this UCLA map enables you to see where 5G is. So this is me here. I am this house here, like here. I don't know whether you can see my little handprint. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at this, this is me. Like all of this is 5G all around me. This is my little Telford. And So it's Ookla 5G map. These guys have been trying to get people to do this while giving them all of this information, like, for ages. This is like December 2019. Why did they put this bit together? September 2017, right? This is 3,500 medical doctors in the UK, 4,000 appealed to the European Commission, 130 doctors in Chile, 60 in France, 400 US, wrote to President Trump, stop deployment in Earth and space, like the Alliance of Nurses, 400 medical professionals, German Environment Board, like, there's people who are doing all of this work, right? And it's official, like, this is literally got all of the information anybody ever needs, and you just need to take this and figure out which law they're breaking and be like, you're fucking breaking the law. Like, the law they broke is the town and they just broke the planning laws. Still a law. They have to do a public awareness campaign. They didn't. So because they haven't done a public awareness campaign, and it's a planning law, which means that they all have to fucking come down. So I would advise whoever's watching this, in whatever country you're in, go and look at your local planning laws and what did they have to do in advance. Because I didn't know that they were erecting a fucking 5G destroy me tower just up the road. And interestingly, certain places in the UK had 5G went live early 2019, like May, June 2019. So EE went live like May, June 2019. So if you were lucky enough to get EE 5G. Other places didn't go live until like 2020. Some places didn't go live till 2021. So I was in hospital having x-rays like May, June 2019, coughing up blood, which we assumed was hay fever. We had got really bad. It's never been that bad before that I was coughing up blood and I couldn't function. Right? I literally 2019 into 2020, like that 12 months it just didn't exist in my life experience, really. I spent the majority of that 8, 9, 10 months like asleep most of the time, unable to function. It was really bad. And then obviously the Rona came round. We were talking about the Rona and all of these other things. So I'm gonna say that very likely that was kind of the icing on the cake for me. So being able to, this was like a great conversation I had today. This is why I love the conversations that we have, because it sparks ideas. So one of the other problems with the kind of sensationalized 5G stuff is nobody's tracking. Everyone's saying, oh, 5G is causing the Rona, but nobody's tracking it, right? Nobody sat down and been like, well, it rolled out on this date, and our hospital, like, you know, how many admittances to hospital with COVID happened within the first week, 2 weeks? How many happened before that point? Like, nobody sat down and done that. So to just say 5G is the reason why people's getting the Rona without any fucking sitting down and even plotting shit on a graph or doing your red string shit, to all of you with your red string, like, you're not actually pulling any pieces together. You're just saying 5G radiation can cause sickness, and it sounds like sickness radiation, therefore 5G caused it, without any Like, you need to have actual factual information. Like, 5G went on, then half the village died, right? I would be like, that's a fucking causation. If nothing else happened in that week, like there wasn't a flood which caused half of the people to die, right? So this is why it becomes very difficult to do it kind of retroactively. Like, how can you guarantee that's what caused that? But thankfully good old Dave responded earlier, and he was a mental health person up north, and he's got all of his old notebooks that a lot of the people he was seeing after taking the flu jabs were very, very, very ill, and unusually so compared to his previous years. So there's a potential starting point, right? For the rollouts that was happening pre-Rona, so I think if we do pre-Rona, it makes it easier. So if you got to find out whether you were 2019, 2020 or 2021 with the rollout, and I've just put like mascara all over my face, it looks like I got black eye. You need to find out if you are a 2019 one, then you're good to go, right? And then you can go onto the Office of National Statistics and you can look at cases, and you can go to your local hospital, you can do an FOI request to your local hospital with the number of people who were presenting, and you can go and find out what does radiation sickness present like, right? The number of people who were going to the doctors because their hay fever allergy got worse. And how do you figure that out? You can find out the FOI for the number of prescriptions of fexofenadine hydrochloride and the increases over the period of, you know, January 2019 to December 2019 compared to year on year. Was there an increase in fexofenadine hydrochloride? If so, what was it? Like, that's a really simple thing, right? What you're really trying to figure out is, did everybody's allergies goes nuts? Because in 2020, people's hay fever was going nuts, right? So mine had already gone nuts the year before, which is why I didn't think anything different was happening the year 2020. And I was already on fexofenadine hydrochloride by then. And then what's come out recently, well, I say recently, I've been talking about it for 12. Why isn't people still aren't talking about fexofenadine as a COVID cure? Which, if you're in the UK, you can get it from Wilko's for £5. It's 30-day tablets. It blocks the S protein from binding. So it's not just a COVID cure, it's also a HIV cure. For £5 from Wilko's, or £7. It's called Treat Hay at Tesco's. Tesco's sell it £7 if you don't have a Wilko's. So I had planned on kind of putting together a little letter that we could all do. Oh, I recommend everybody kind of sign this. So I've signed this as well. You don't have to be a scientist or anything. You just be a person. You just be you as a person. Here we are. So I had planned on doing the kind of like a skeleton letter, but time ran away with me, so I haven't. But hopefully you've got the gist of, like, it's not going to be that hard. If you want to do it over the next, couple of days. Otherwise, I will be putting one together for myself, and then obviously, as always, I will kind of share it. So if you want to wait, wait. But if you just didn't know how to kind of do it, then that's how I will be doing mine, and that's how I recommend doing it. When you can just fuck them over with the planning laws, because you have to think, what law is going to give me the result that I want? The result that I want is them removed. How do you get them removed? Was the easiest way. If you think about what the council do all the time to, if you erect a 3-story, you know, 3-story building in your garden, and you apply for retroactive planning permission, and they say you can't have it, is they will come down and they will tell you to fucking remove it. And if you don't remove it, they will come and bulldoze that shit out, right? So if you want them out, you find a planning law they've breached to put it in, because that's the law they broke. But that's, I would suggest, the easiest way to deal with it. And even the World Health Organization has come out and said, you know, we're going to be careful because it can cause cancer. So, and it doesn't matter, right? So with regards to the 1990 Town and Planning Act, it doesn't matter even if there's only a minimal risk, like a 1% increase in cancer or heart disease or any of those things. The law states they have to do a public health campaign, and they haven't. Doesn't matter if the risk is minimal. They just haven't followed the rules. They haven't followed the law. Like, this is why sometimes it becomes easy if you find the right law. It becomes easy. Because it's not an argument about whose doctor is right or whose scientist is right. It's like, this is the law, you didn't fucking do it, therefore you have illegally erected these 5G towers, they fucking come down. If you want to re-erect them, you must do this public awareness campaign, you must give the people the opportunity to respond, and then potentially you can put it up again. So, and then we can all be healthy again. Yay! But so I will be doing my letter ASAP. We're about to have like no internet for a couple of days, so I will probably be AWOL for the next couple of days. Actually, we've had no phone lines for 7 days, so, but we have 2 internets. We have Sky and Virgin, and Sky's been down for 7 days and I can't get anyone to fix it, and then Virgin they're coming out to fix some faults on our line, and we don't have any faults on our line. I don't know. I think somebody doesn't want me on the internet, so we'll see what happens. But I do have my mobile phone, but I don't like using it, so I just probably won't be. So anyway, thank you very much for being with me for quite a long session today. Hopefully it's been helpful. I will see you all next Wednesday. I don't know what it is. It's not, is it Thursday now? It is Thursday now. Right, I'll see you all next Wednesday. See you next Wednesday at 7:30. Have an amazing week. Lots and lots of love. Mwah. Bye for now.